Welcome to the audio version of the Decoy book by William Garrido, with collaborations from some of the best in the field. So I'm going to read you this book, and I'm going to add some things to the book. So I'm going to stick to the script, but I'm also going to deviate a little bit to add more value to this audio version. So let's start with acknowledgments. I want to thank and dedicate this book to everyone who contributed to this project. It started as an idea that got fueled by your cooperation. I hope you realize how important this book is for so many protection dog trainers and aspiring decoys, as well as handlers. In no particular order, I would like to list and acknowledge the following dog trainers and protection helpers, which would have rendered this project useless without their willingness to take their time to talk to me. So the people that got back to me and the people that did the interviews and contributed to this project are Jerry Bradshaw, Bart and Michael Ballone, Dave Croyer, Ludovic Turbane, Franco Angelini, Jeff Riccio, Tom Rose, Sean Thankachin, Josh Kirby, Stefan Van Minsel, Daryl Ritchie, Jessica Vampola, Koi Fam, and a special thanks to Dr. Paul and Nathan Burrow from Burrow Chiropractic Clinic. These are my chiropractors. I know some people are not believers. The chiropractic field is one that some people are not huge believers in, and some do believe in the benefits of chiropractic therapy. I myself, from experience and from research, I can tell you it's made a difference in my routine. So I want to thank them because they added to this book too. They contributed to this book. And these guys, these chiropractors, have been working with protection helpers, specifically with protection helpers and other athletes. But they've worked with protection helpers for the past 20 years. So their input is very valuable, and it's going to really help you out when we get to that section too. So when you watch working dogs take a bad guy down, or go into a sports event where they take the decoy down, or where they bite the decoy, and you see the dog flawlessly transition into a bite, it's just one of the most interesting and amazing things to behold. It's really cool. Whenever you watch working dogs do this, do you see that long bite? It really is worthy of admiration. All the attention and admiration go to the dog. First thing you think of is like, wow, that dog is awesome. Even those who are just watching, who know nothing about protection sports or protection dogs, if you're just watching, you can't help but drop your jaw at the sight of that move. And after admiring the dog, then we look at the handler like, wow, that's an awesome trainer, right? Or that police officer, that's awesome. That competitor, he's got a nice dog. Good job, guys, right? It does take dedication on the handler's part to develop such dog. I agree. Okay, I do have one of those. I compete myself, and I have been on the handler part of the equation, so I know how much work it takes. The dog and the handler deserve all the admiration they get. Lastly, some of us will ask, "Hey, where did that dog come from? Where'd you get that dog? What breeder did you get him from? Who are his parents? What lines is he out of? How old is your dog?" Right now, some of us get a little bit more geeky about it. Like, oh man, like tell me what the bloodlines are. Is he Belgian lines? Is he French lines? Is he Dutch lines? Is he Eastern European? Well, where is he from? Right. So we geek out on it because we're like, what? This is so freaking amazing. And again, plenty of work and dedication from the handler and the dog. Also the breeder, right? The responsible breeders are the ones that are also producing these powerful dogs too. So the admiration makes sense to go to the handler, the dog, the breeder. But this book is not about any of them. This book is about the club member who shows up diligently and volunteers his or her body to make that dog great. Okay, because a great dog and a great handler is not crap without a good helper. Even if you do your own helper work at first. you're still going to need to prove that on somebody who's going to be willing to be your helper, to be your decoy. Right? This book is dedicated to the training director, people like Koi Pham, who have invested years of love, dedication, and at times permanent damage, even if it's minor, to some part of their body for the sake of their craft. I talked to Koi some months ago during a trial that I went to, that I was decoying at, and I caught him for a few minutes, and we were chatting for a little bit, and I was like, hey, how many members you got? He's like, I got like 20 members in my club. I'm like, that's a lot of members. And he's like, yeah, and primarily it's just me and this other decoy. I do have some other decoys at that time, right? He was telling me I do have some other decoys, but they're new, so you have to like really teach them, help them out. But most of the catching is done by me and this other guy, and sometimes it's just mostly me. I'm like, wow, I've been there before. I know what it's like to catch dogs hour after hour after hour. It's exhausting, right? So this book is about people like them, people like Koi. It's about the police officer or military working dog handler or kennel master. That's a position with the working dog community, trying their best to manage a full-time job and a demanding job, serving their community and country, and still trying to make that dog in his unit fit for duty. I mean, these canine handlers, these canine trainers, police dog trainers, working dog trainers, their job is not just training all day long. They're doing records, they're doing their additional duties, plus on top of that, they have to maintain training standards. So it's a lot of work for these guys too. Okay, this book is for the person that is interested in learning how to be a decoy/helper and how to get started. I wanted to put this book together because there are already several materials written about the dog and the training. I wanted to write something that I could go back in time to when I first got the idea. And I thought about this. Like, if I wrote this, would it be something that if I put this together, I could go back in time, like to, when I was first getting started into this, and if I wrote this now and I could go back in time, hand this book to that person and go, hey dude, you gotta read this book. It's me from the future, it's you from the future, you gotta read this book. This book will help you out. That's how I was writing it. That's how I wanted it to be. Would it help me when I was first getting started? Would it help me if I read this book? And the answer is absolutely yes. Okay, I firmly believe this is one of the best, and I'm saying this with modesty, okay? I definitely firmly believe that this is one of the best books out there on helper work. I don't think there is any of its kind. And when I talked to the helpers, when I pitched the idea to them, all of them told me the same thing. Yeah, I don't think there's a book like that. Jerry Bradshaw told me the same thing. Dave Croyer, same thing. Yeah, I don't think there's any book like that. That's how I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be very unique, and that's why I put it together for you guys, for everybody. This is not only good for helpers or new helpers. This is good for also helpers that are, more experienced. This is also good for the handlers. Okay. If you feel like you're not new and you're like, oh, I don't need to read that book, I'm a seasoned decoy, you really are stupid. You're a fool. Okay, the information in this book can be helpful even to experienced decoys. This book has already been in print, has already been sold a bunch of times, and I'm constantly getting messages from people who have been decoying for a while too, and they tell me, dude, this book is awesome. I've been decoying for a while, and this book is just really helpful. Okay, so this is an awesome, awesome book, and I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back. This is just an idea. I put it together, but what makes it great is the input and the feedback, the input from some of these helpers. Okay, you cannot get this type of information that you're going to get in other books. I mean, if you buy a book on protection work, if you buy a book on decoy work, you're going to get one author telling you his ideas, which I'm not saying is bad, but you're going to get that author's perspective. This book has my perspective, but it also has other very prominent helpers' perspectives. That's what makes this book so great. Now I'm going to be going over terminology. So we're on that part of the book where I'm going to go over terminology. So we have a common ground. There's a bunch of terms out there, and sometimes those terms are not clearly defined. So this section of the book is going to go over the terminology. Okay, so here's a list of terms that are regularly used in the protection training industry. This will help you better understand your craft, and it'll also help you understand the interviews. As I read this book, some of these terms are going to be said, and I want to clarify what these terms are. Okay, so the first one is the term decoy or helper. Okay, so decoy/helper. The words decoy and helper are interchangeable. Throughout the book, you're going to see both terms describing the same thing. The decoy or the helper refers to the person wearing the bite suit or sleeve to take a bite from the dog, whether in training or trial settings. Now, some people get very technical about it, and some people are like, well, a helper doesn't just take the bite. A helper could also be the person just holding the tug. And yes, there are different kinds of helpers. I can be a helper for somebody, and I could help them with their leash. I could help them with obedience. And my job as a helper could just be holding the clatter stick, holding a tug. But for the purpose of this book, the term helper also means, not just for the book, but also in general. Okay, if you go to clubs, some clubs have this like almost elitist ideology that the term decoy is just too redneck. The term helper is much better. So helper, decoy, same thing, okay? If you hear the word decoy, if you hear the word helper as I'm reading this, I'm really talking about the same thing. The next term is trial decoy or trial helper. You're going to hear about this too. A trial decoy or a trial helper is a person who has been certified to represent a specific sport in a trial through a qualification process. So a trial is an event, and I have that's the next term actually down the list. But like if I go to a trial where people are going to compete in PSA, and part of PSA is bite work, you're going to have decoys on the field to either be distractions or to take the bites, or both, right? So these decoys are not just random volunteers that we pick from the crowd and go, hey, can you put a suit on so this dog can compete? No. Everybody in the field that has a bite suit on has gone through a certification process. They have done their certification process. They've been graded. They've been scored by PSA by Sean Siggins, the decoy director of decoys. Okay, so every sport has that qualification standard for their decoys. They have to know what they're doing. They have to show proficiency in the moves. They have to understand the sport so that you are able to properly and safely test these dogs. So that's what a trial decoy or trial helper is. The same in every sport. Okay, trial decoys have to know the rules of the sport they represent. They have to maintain qualification standards, meaning they have to, depending on the sport, they have to either recertify every so many years, or they have to attend trials on a yearly basis for them to maintain that status. The trial decoy's main job during trials is to provide the judge and the handler with the means to showcase the dog's strengths and their weaknesses, and the training in the specific scenarios outlined by each event, by each sport. That's the job of the decoy. So for this to work, the decoy has to know the sport. For the sport to know the decoy knows that, the decoy has to go through a certification process. And sometimes you fail. I went to my first decoy camp to certify as a trial decoy, and I failed. didn't have the stamina, and I needed to work on it a little bit more. So it's not just like I attended and like, hey, congrats, now you are a trial decoy. No. They told me, these are the things you got to work on. These are the things you got to work on. You did not pass, so you can't represent the sport. See you next time. So I went to the next certification camp, so to the next certification decoy seminar, and I passed. So once I passed, that's when they were like, okay, now you are showing the proficiency, the stamina, the technique to represent the sport. So then I passed. Okay, so it's not just you show up and then you're done. You show up, you get your ass kicked for 2 days, and you either pass or you fail. Now let's talk specifically about what a trial is. A trial is an event. It's like I said a little bit ago, it's an event organized to test the handlers and their dogs. Each sport has a different set of rules and point systems to test the teams with. Their level of relevance can range from club-held trials to regional trials to nationals and world championships. Training decoys or helpers, that's a different term. So training decoy, training helpers. So we just went over trial decoys. Now we're going to go over training decoys, okay, or helpers. A training decoy is the person whose responsibility is to help the handler and dog to prepare for trials or real-life scenarios. And this is done to address the weakness, develop the young dog, troubleshoot, do some damage control, whatever. Training decoys should have a thorough understanding of dog training, timing, body language, and use all this knowledge to train the dog and the team to get better. Training decoys are not always certified as trial decoys, just like trial decoys aren't always good training decoys. So a training decoy would be your person that is at your club or doing the training session with you and your dog, and they're basically training you and training the dog with like grip work, and their job is to ensure the dog progresses, to ensure that dog feels more powerful, to ensure that if there are some weaknesses, that those weaknesses get addressed. So it's basically your trainers, your coach, your dog's coach, to get better at bite work. That's the training decoy, the training helper's job. Now, good training decoys are not always trial decoys, because a trial decoy has a very specific job. They go to events and they test dogs. The training decoy doesn't test the dog. Okay, maybe occasionally they'll test the dog to see what needs to be worked on, but the training decoy is the one doing all the work behind the curtains, behind the scenes. So a training decoy does not have to be certified. Okay, so training decoy is not always a trial decoy. Just like trial decoys, the people that you see at trials, they're not always good training decoys. They might be good with the sport, with the mechanics, but they might not know how to develop a dog from puppy to adult, from zero to hero. So that's the difference between a training decoy and a trial decoy. Now they can be the same. So I do both. I help my club members' dogs. I work on their grip. I strengthen them. If there are weaknesses, I address the weaknesses. But I also go to trials as a trial decoy. So you can do both, but they're different. Okay? You can do both, but you don't have to. And just because you're one at the other doesn't mean you're good at the other. So a good training decoy could be a lousy trial decoy. Just like a good trial decoy might be a lousy training decoy. This is what people don't understand. The decoy is not just a decoy. There has to be skill in all of that. Okay, skill on both ends. Okay, next term, long bite. You're going to hear this a lot in sports applications, also in working dog, like police, military dog applications. These are like long bites. That's what they're called. Long bites, long attacks, courage test, face attacks. That's a French ring, Mondio ring term. So when you hear long bite, long attack, these are all terms to describe downfield bites in which the decoy is facing the dog. And what that decoy is doing, depending on the sport, which can range from squeeving, right? Squeeving the dog, or eskeeving, that's what I meant. Eskeeving the dog, or dodging the dog, or walking or running towards the dog. So in French ring, what you're doing is you're dodging that dog. So if the dog is sent on a long bite, so there's a big amount of distance, pretty decent length between the dog and the helper. When that dog is sent, the decoy's job is to make that dog miss in French ring. In IGP, the helper is kind of running towards the dog. In PSA, depending on the level, the dog is either walking towards the dog or running at the dog in a straight line. So there's no dodging. Okay, so those are just some of the differences on the different sports of what this type of bite entails. Now, there's another type of bite, another term. It's called the runaway bite or the flea bite. This scenario involves the dog engaging the decoy as he runs away. Okay, so a flea bite or a runaway bite sounds pretty self-descriptive. The decoy here, what it's doing is the decoy is either walking away or running away, and this is now the dog running at the decoy and more prey oriented. Okay, so the decoy is running away. This is also one that is a little bit trickier because as you're running away, it can be a little bit easier to lose your balance. So this can be a high risk scenario. I've seen this look really, really ugly when you see dogs running full speed and the helper, especially if the helper is inexperienced, can be very dangerous. The helper's running away. It looks fun, but it can be very dangerous because if the dog now is running full speed at this decoy that is very inexperienced, catching him at full speed, now you're not talking about only the decoy potentially getting hurt. Now you're also talking about the dog possibly getting hurt. I've seen dogs just get their necks all twisted up because the decoy fell on top of the dog. I've done runaway bites with Rust, like not myself, but with all the helpers. I mean, it just looks ugly because Rust, my dog, is really fast, really, really fast, hits really, really powerful. You have long distance. The more distance you have, the more momentum the dog gains. You combine that with the helper that is not very experienced, it can look really, really ugly. The dog could definitely break its neck. So you have to be very careful with this. The decoy must do everything possible to avoid falling on top of the dog. Here's another term called washing a dog. You're going to hear this quite a bit too. So washing a dog or washing a dog out is when it has been decided that the dog is not suitable for a particular activity. This could be due to health problems or temperament, drive inadequacies that would impede the dog from such activity. For instance, if you bring me your Malinois or your German Shepherd, your Dutch Shepherd, and I work with your dog, and I test your dog. I test your dog, and maybe your dog doesn't show a lot of promise. I'm a little bit forgiving, so I'm not gonna go, hey, get rid of that dog. Some people do that. What I'll do is I'll go, let's give it a little bit of time. Maybe the dog just needs to adjust a little bit. Maybe the dog, who knows? Maybe the dog is maturing, whatever the case might be. I've seen dogs that act a little bit shy or uninterested, but then as they mature, they gain all the power and confidence. Same thing especially with females or, other young dogs. So what I'll do is I'll kind of work the dog a little bit longer. Sometimes you can tell right away, your dog doesn't want to do this at all. Let's wash him. But a lot of times I'll go, let's just wait a little bit. Now, there's only so much waiting you can do. Only so much waiting you can do. At some point, you got to let the handler know, hey, this dog really doesn't quite have it. He doesn't quite have the character. Really doesn't quite have what it takes to do this. Okay? Because every sport's different. You know, in PSA, for instance, PSA is a very high, heavy pressure sport. Now, every sport will claim that their sport is very high pressure. And of course, I'm saying this with a little bit of bias, but if you see a PSA event and you compare it to some of the other bite events, you definitely see a lot of pressure there. So when you have a dog that doesn't have the character, if you have a dog that doesn't have the nerves, right? That's a very common thing we say. Doesn't have the nerves for that, or is very uninterested or non-committal. That's when you got to go, we cannot make this dog what you want it to be. We need to wash that dog. Then it saves heartaches for the handler. It saves time. It saves the decoy from having to just put all this time and physical effort into this dog that can only get so far, or is not even going to get far at all. So that's what washing a dog is. When you determine this dog right here doesn't have what it takes, doesn't have the right drives. You can't make them. You can't make a dog do what it is not designed to do. You have to breed for these purposes. Sometimes you don't breed for them, but the dog has to have the right drives and the right character to perform. You can't bring me a shy, fearful dog that chases balls every now and then and you say, hey, I think he'll do PSA. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work. And I've had people that have tried to do that before. They're like, hey, I want to see if she'll do well in PSA. It's not going to do well in PSA. I can already tell you. Okay, based on what you're telling me and based on what I'm seeing right now, this dog is not going to do PSA. It's not going to do a protection sport. It is fearful. It doesn't like people. It's very aware of its character. Why would it be okay doing this sport in which its character is going to be challenged? Definitely not. So that's when we go, let's watch that dog. Okay, bite suits. You're going to hear that term a lot in protection training in general. Okay, you're going to hear about this in the book too. But a bite suit, although very self-explanatory, it needs to be addressed for the new people. There are different types of bite suits. I get messages from time to time where people go, hey, what bite suit do you recommend? And that is such a broad question. It'd be like me calling you if you do golf. This is how not familiar I am with golf, right? If I call you, and I would do this, not that I would ever try to get into golf, but if I call you, it's like, hey, if I message you, hey, and you do golf, what club should I get? What should I get for? I want to get into golf. Which club do you recommend? And you probably tell me, well, you need this, and this, and this, right? It's just broad. It's just a broad question for sports in general, protection sports in general. Same thing. You can't just go out, I'm thinking about getting a bite, so what do you think I should get? Because there are different types of suits that serve different purposes. And being a decoy can be challenging enough. The last thing you want is to battle against a suit that doesn't work for you. So you should also note that bite suits are not, one size fits all. Typically, they're not. If that bite suit is not sized for you, it will not help you and it will not help the dog that you're working with. Okay, you have to wear a bite suit that fits you. That's why a lot of manufacturers will tailor it to you. They'll ask for your measurements. So now let's go over the different types of bite suits. That's a very, very common indicator of people who are not familiar with this, which is fine. I mean, I've been in that place myself. There's nothing wrong with being new. There's nothing wrong with not knowing. That's why I put this book together. So a bite suit is not just a bite suit. There's different applications. We're going to go over them now. Okay, there is training weight. This is regardless of what brand you go with. Okay, there are some big companies. I'm not gonna name names, but some big companies will go, yeah, we sell this bite suit, and it's like small, medium, large, and I've worn those bite suits. Big names. If you're a little bit in the industry, you know what I'm talking about, what companies I'm talking about. If you just look up bite suits, you'll see those. Or if you go to these websites and you go to the bite suit category, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's just like plain. Like, this is a bite suit. We sell it. It's this much. There's not a whole lot of thought put into it. And then when you end up wearing them, you can't even move in them. That's what people think about bite suits. Okay, when I used to work with the contract working dogs, with the police dogs, that was the common belief. The common belief was, let's get the guy with the suit, or let's put the suit on this person so that they can, and everybody gets a laugh out of it, because you put a bite suit on a person, they can barely move. Like, they're like just like barely moving. If they fall, they can't get up. That's wrong. If you putting on a bite suit, or you giving a bite suit to somebody, makes them look ridiculous and they can barely move, and they look like a turtle that they're hiding in their shell when they're wearing the suit, that's terrible. You don't need to be working your dog on that. You don't need to be wearing that. That bite suit does not help you. It doesn't serve you, and it doesn't serve the dog. Your bite suit should be comfortable. You should be able to move in them. If you fall, you should be able to get up. You shouldn't look like a turtle when you are wearing a bite suit. So there are different kinds, and I'm going to be going over those. There are training weight. You're going to hear this, training weight. So if you go to a manufacturer, if you go to a company that sells bite suits, that makes bite suits, that might be one of the categories that might be advertised. Or if you call somebody like Josh Kirby and you go, hey, I need a bite suit, he might ask you, what are you looking for? You can't just go, I need a bite suit. He's probably going to tell you, okay, what are you going to be using it for? And then he will determine whether you need a training weight or something else. So training weight, these suits are generally heavier and are meant to provide the dog with more material to bite on while protecting the helper. Training weight suits are known for being heavy and even difficult to move around in. Now, different manufacturers make bite suits, and their style and cuts may vary. But in general, training weight suits are on the awkward category, on the not too much, but they're on the larger surface. You still should not feel like you're wearing a cast all over your body. But that's typically what a training weight suit is. Then you have another type of suit. Different type of bite suit is called competition weight. Competition weight suits, or competition suits, are made with the trial decoy in mind. Okay? So if you're a trial decoy and you're going to be going to these events and you're going to be catching several dogs, you want something that you can be very movable in. You want something you can have a lot of flexibility in. So it helps to have a competition suit. Okay? What it does is it provides maximum flexibility. You can move, run, jump, all kinds of things. But they're also known to be minimally protective due to their lightness. I've seen some competition bite suits they give you a lot of flexibility, but they're very thin. So you compromise a little bit of that protection for the sake of the flexibility, which in competition you do need. Again, if you're doing a lot of decoying, right? The French ring decoys, and those guys they have to be very athletic. They have to be a step faster than the dogs. If you see a French ring trial, you'll see how athletic and movable and flexible they have to be. So a lot of them end up wearing competition suits. A lot of PSA decoys do too. But that's the thing. You get a lot of flexibility, but not a whole lot of protection. So you have to keep that in mind. So if you go to like not Craigslist, you're probably not going to see one of these on Craigslist. But if you go to like one of the Facebook groups and you see a bite suit advertised, you have to kind of have an idea of what kind of bite suit you're getting. Because if your main thing is, I want a bite suit so that I can develop these dogs, so that I can work on the grip, so that I could use it at a club, and I could, work the dogs and test them in training, okay? If I need to develop their targeting, all of that, and you get a suit that is a competition weight, it's not going to serve you. You're going to get bruised all the time. You're not going to give the dog as much surface or hardness to bite on, and you're just going to end up getting bruised a lot, okay? So you have to be careful with that. Yes, you're going to get a lot of flexibility, but it's not going to help you. It's going to just lower your protection. You're not going to last. So you have to be careful with that. You have to know what kind of suit you're getting. Now, if you go, well, I want a bite suit so that I can go in competition, so I can go to this Decoy camp, and the suit you're looking at is training weight. It's possible if it's really broken in, but now you also have to know, you're getting a lot of protection, but not as much flexibility. Then there is semi-competition or semi-training weight. So these are two separate types of weights, but can be easily put in the same category. They're designed to give you the protection and bite surface of a training suit, but the flexibility of a competition suit, with as little compromise of each as possible. This is normally a go-to choice for a lot of clubs and training decoys. Many trial decoys use semi-competition suits on trials and in club meetings. And that's what I do. So I have a semi-competition bite suit. And so this gives me the protection that I need on club, but also gives me some of the flexibility that I need for trials. So I end up using the same suit for trials as I use for club. So semi-competition or semi-training, they're kind of nice in the middle type of suits. Then you have other types of bite suits. These are called sport-specific suits. Sport-specific suits are typically your trial suits. So there are a couple of protection sports or organizations like Belgian Ring and KNPV that have very specific requirements for the suits that are meant to cater to the sport specifics. For instance, in Belgian Ring, the bite suit is synthetic, but the shin, so from the knee down, and the forearms from the elbow down to the wrist, is made of jute. This bite suit is only going to be helpful in those instances. So if I wear like a Belgian Ring bite suit for PSA, it's not going to help me at all, because the jute surfaces are specifically made for Belgian Ring. So the dog is supposed to bite the forearm, or the dog is supposed to bite the shins in that sport. So in training, it would make sense to train that way. In trials, you would have to trial that way in Belgian Ring. So that suit would not help me at all in PSA. If I was like looking for a bite suit, and I was like, man, I really need a bite suit, and somebody happened to have a Belgian Ring bite suit for sale, I can't just go, awesome, I need that bite suit so that I could do PSA in my club. It wouldn't help me at all. It's not going to help me at all, because the parts that are not covered with jute are very thin. And maybe the only thing I could use that suit in PSA for would be for like the leg bites. But even then, it's made of jute. At some point, I have to graduate the PSA dog, into the synthetic material, the French linen. So you have to be aware that some sport, there's really those two, Belgian Ring and KNPV. KNPV, now for training, you could use a regular bite suit, a training weight. But for the event, which only takes place in Holland, by the way, so the bite suit there it's different. It's got a leather inner piece and an outer piece. So very sport specific, very unique. So those are sport specific bite suits. And also, like, even the French ring cuts on the other bite suits, they're a little bit different too. They're a little bit bulkier and that whole thing. So that's how that works. Okay, now I'm gonna be going over sports. Okay, so protection sports have been a part of the working dog tradition for a very long time. It has been used as breed suitability testing, preparation for police work, and personal protection, and a recreational outlet for many people and their working dogs. That's kind of the whole thing behind protection sports. The goal of the sport event is to display and test the dog's temperament and work ethic. So the goal of the sport is to test the dog's character and their work ethic and your training too. Okay? The skill and dedication of the handler or trainer. The purpose of this book is not to add to the debate of whether sport dogs make good protection dogs or the other way around, okay? But rather to give the reader a baseline of the different applications of a working dog. For simplicity, I will conclude that sport training is a set of skills the dog must know to be successful in the trial field. Some of these skills are good skills for the quote-unquote real life scenarios, depending on the sport and the exercise. But there still needs to be much more thought put towards the application of the skills under different variables and the temperament of the dog. So the big debate is, you hear this all the time. You see it in Facebook groups where people always talk about this. It's a big topic of debate. People go, oh, sport dogs don't make good protection dogs. And, they're like, my dog doesn't do sports because my dog is a real protection dog. So I don't need to do sports. They look at sports as it's just for show. It doesn't really do anything. Now, here's the thing. Some good sport dogs, like really, really good sport dogs, depending on the sport, but some really, really good sport dogs, high scores, everything, would truly make lousy protection dogs. I can tell you this from experience. Okay? Some really, really good protection sport dogs would make really lousy real life scenario protection dogs. It's just how it is. It depends on the dog. And some really, really good protection dogs might make lousy sport dogs. But it's not necessarily the case. There are some good protection sport dogs that would do well under real life scenarios, so to speak. And yes, a lot of it does involve training. Training has to be part of it. There has to be generalization. But I'm talking about character, okay? Depending on the sport, again, some sports are very predictable. Some sports are very, 1, 2, 3. And obviously the dog kind of realizes that. But then a real scenario might pop in. Real scenarios are unpredictable, and now the dog might go, I don't know any of this. I'm not doing this for fun. So why am I going to do it? So that's just a little bit of the difference. I don't want to debate a lot into this. I have an episode on that particular topic on my podcast. So if you go to Dog Training is My Passion on any of the podcast platforms, you'll see it there. And it's titled something along those lines, Sport Dogs versus Real Protection Dogs. And I talk extensively on that topic. So both the training and trial decoy play key roles in the development and success of the sport dog. Okay, the training decoy prepares the dog for what the trial decoy will bring to the trial. The training decoy, their job is to help the team gain the maximum amount of points in trial. Okay, the training decoy's job So if I'm a training decoy, which I am, my job is to help every team that I help, every team that comes into my field for training, for club meetings. My job is to help them rack as many points on trial as possible. I want that dog to feel powerful in training. I want that dog to be maybe tested a little bit so that we could identify those weak points and strengthen those weak points so that when they do go to trial, they get the maximum amount of points. That's my job as a training decoy. As a trial decoy, my job is to test the dog. So if I'm a trial decoy, when I go to trials as a trial decoy and I put that suit on and I'm step on that trial field, I am no longer a training decoy. Okay, my job there is not to build the dog up. Okay, my job is to test that dog, to expose the weaknesses. That's the trial decoy's job. So if I can expose those weaknesses in trial, I'm going to do that because this is a sport. Okay, it's basically the team against the helper, basically. Okay, now in a fair and safe way. We're not like beating dogs or anything. We're staying within the boundaries of safety and sports. Okay, so there are some things in the sport, depending on the sport, that I'm allowed to do, some things that I am not allowed to do, and I need to stay within those boundaries as a trial decoy. That's why I have to go, and you have to go through a certification camp. You have to go through a qualification process. So the trial decoy's job is to test the dog and expose those weaknesses, and to provide the team with the means to showcase their preparation to the judge. Okay, so as a trial decoy, I'm going to test that dog. I'm going to expose their weaknesses and their strengths for the judge to go, okay, here's what your score is going to be. Here's what you need to work on, etc. Okay, so that's the thing with trial decoys. Now let's go a little bit into the sports. So we're going to start with Schutzen. So Schutzen, IPO, now called IGP. So you're going to hear that throughout the book. Some of the interviews, the decoys that I'm interviewing, they'll say IGP. They'll say Schutzen sometimes. So sometimes they say IPO. So this is kind of to give you a baseline. If you hear IPO or IGP or Schutzen, they're referring to the same sport. Okay, Schutzen originated in Germany in the early 1900s and was developed specifically as a breed suitability test for the German Shepherd. As one of the most popular protection sports today, Schutzen is a venue for many dog trainers and handlers of different breeds to compete in a protection sport. Different breeds, of course, as long as they have the drives and character to perform, by the way. Okay. Which will test them on obedience, tracking, and bite work. That's what the sport does. It'll test you in obedience, tracking, and bite work. One unique characteristic of Schutzen is that the bite work is done on a bite sleeve. So the helper, the decoy, is not wearing a bite suit. They're wearing just a sleeve and a padded stick on the other hand. So so now it's known as IGP. Okay, it used to be Schutzen, and it used to be known as IPO. Next sport, American Schutzen. So American Schutzen, I know I just went over Schutzen, originated in Germany, but here's what's happened with Schutzen. It's been evolving from Schutzen to IPO to IGP, and every time it evolves, the rules slightly change, and some people are not happy with some of the changes that have been made to the original Schutzen. Okay, I don't want to get political here, and you might completely disagree with what I'm about to say, and that's perfectly fine. But one common complaint about Schutzen constantly evolving into IPO and IGP, it's that it just keeps making it keeps softening it and softening the sport. And so here now comes American Schutzen, established in 2019. Now I got this from the website, okay, from the PSA / American Schutzen. PSA and American Schutzen are sister sports. They're different sports, but they're under the same organization. So established in 2019, the mission of American Schutzhund is to restore and maintain Schutzhund as a relevant breed suitability test for working dogs in America. So now there are several reasons that make this sport a valid alternative over IGP. Okay, but overall, it's very similar to IGP, and that there is a sleeve as the target. There are some things that are naturally different, and that's for you to do your research on. Okay, you might think American Schutzhund is completely unnecessary. You might be happy with IGP, and that is perfectly fine. But American Schutzhund is sort of an alternative to IGP. And again, do your research. Go to the website. Just look up PSA American Schutzhund, and you should find the website. Just take you right to the website, and it'll tell you everything about the sport. It's got the rule book and everything. Okay, then you have Belgian Ring, which is in 3 different federations: NVBK, KK, USH, KCB. This is another sport that can be traced back to the late 1800s. It's a very old sport, with the first ring sport trial in 1903. 1903. Okay, it's crazy. Belgian ring sport is a protection sport that has influenced many, if not all, of today's protection sports. It's characterized by a full protective bite suit with jute coverings on the forearms and below the knees, and no equipment at all on the muzzle agitation scenarios, on the muzzle bite work scenarios. The primary bite target for this sport is the forearm and the shin. KNPV. KNPV originated in 1907 in the Netherlands. The association was formed to provide a rigorous program that will lead to an official police dog certification. The KNPV various titles can only be acquired in the Netherlands, although its American counterpart, APA, which mirrors KNPV, holds trials and titles its equivalent. KNPV helpers are characterized by a unique style bite suit made of an inner leather piece and outer piece. The primary target here is the left bicep, the tricep, and the calf. Then we have French ring. I've dabbled a little bit into French ring, and it's definitely very, very athletic helper work type of sport. So French ring, sharing the same roots and being influenced by Belgian ring, French ring is a protection sport in which the decoy actively exposes the dog's weaknesses. French ring decoys go through a very rigorous selection process for acquiring and maintaining certifications. It is a very, very unique certification process, a selection process. And the more it's got like different levels. Like you could be good for certain levels, but you have to be good for like the higher levels. And so you go through this selection process. It's very, very rigorous. The French ring decoy wears a full bite suit and is known for actively evading, what we call esquiving, the dog's attacks on the field and bringing pressure through stick hits, spatial pressure, so they're like leaning on top of the dog. The primary targets are both the legs, but also the upper body. However, any part of the suit is a target during a trial. So if like the dog bites the wrist, the dog bites the stomach or the chest, that's still very acceptable, because again, the decoy is trying to evade, esquive the dog. So whatever that dog can get a hold of, that's what's acceptable. Okay. Then you have Mondial ring, developed in the 80s by representatives of different sports worldwide. It's a close combination of different sports, and it includes Belgian and French ring. They're themed trials, which is a characteristic of Mondial ring. It's very similar to Belgian ring, which are themed trials as well. Okay, so in Mondial ring, you have themed trials in which different distractions are congruent to the theme over the field. The Mondial ring decoy is equipped with a full bite suit and accessories such as streamers, pool noodles, etc. And they use these to test the dog's character. Primary targets here are going to be both the legs, but also the upper body. And just like in French ring, any part of the suit can be a target during trial. Next, we're going to go to PSA. PSA is the sport that I do, and I really like PSA. It's got some good components to it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about PSA. PSA is an American sport that originated in 2001. The sport contains some predictable elements, but as the levels increase, so does the unpredictability, with surprise scenarios and the judges' creativity. So the entry level, there's no surprise scenarios there. The entry level is what you're gonna see on the field. Then level 1, there is a certain level of surprise scenarios towards the end of the trial, towards the bite work session. And these surprise scenarios, they're still known, but you have to choose any of the judge gets to choose any of those scenarios. So now you have more unpredictability. And then you have the level 2, which the surprise scenarios in level 2, now they're the judge's creativity. And level 3 in PSA, everything from obedience to bite work, everything is up to the judge's creativity. Everything is made up there. Okay, again, as long as it's within the guidelines of the sport and within the guidelines of safety. But the Decoy here is equipped with a full bite suit for most of the scenarios, except for the hidden sleeve and carjacking, and no equipment for the muzzle agitation scenarios. The PSA trial Decoy's main objective is to put as much pressure and presence on the dog through the use of accessories, courage tests. There's a lot of screaming in from the Decoys and PSA, and all of this as dictated by the rule book, the judge, and the specific scenario. Except for the forearm during the carjacking scenario, the primary target for PSA is going to be the left bicep or the left leg or the left tricep and the back of the left leg, so the calf. But being a bite suit sport, any part of the suit can be a target during trial. Now, we have a few other sports, which I'm going to really quickly lump into one. Sorry, guys. So Can-Am Pro Sports, APPDA, and NAPD, these are all American sports that consist of various scenarios to include surprise scenarios as well. The next part of the book is personal protection, police, and military work. So we just spent a little bit of time talking about the different sports. Now we're going to be talking about a different application. The application of bite work training for personal protection and police and military work is a known and common practice in the protection industry. There are records of dogs used in military application tracing back as far as the Roman period. There is no trial decoy in this type of work. The dogs are not being prepared to pass or score high on an event. Although there are events held to showcase the police and military working dog, it is not the reason to train these dogs. The ultimate test of these dogs comes in the form of criminal apprehensions, deterrence of potential threats, and at times life and death situations. The decoy's job is to prepare the dogs and teams for as many training variables as the imagination can conceive, because you're talking about scenarios that you really cannot necessarily predict. So the more scenarios you work with these types of dogs, the better. I've worked with this when I started working with dogs in general. The first dog training school I went to was a police dog training school. And one of the things that I had to do was do a bunch of creative stuff. Like if I was the helper, if I was the decoy, I would do things like hide in a building and basically play hide and seek. Climb a tree, have the dog figure out a way to jump as high or climb as high into the tree as it could to grab me, to just do a bunch of things, a bunch of surprise scenarios to prepare the dogs to perform in real scenarios. So now this is me just going slightly off the book here. But that's what goes into personal protection, police, and military work applications. Many of the skills of a protection sport dog can acquire, that a sport dog can acquire, are very applicable to real life scenarios. Okay, so many of the things that you can teach a sport dog, many of those skills can be applicable to real life scenarios. They can be. Okay, however, the decoy has to ensure the dog is properly and safely generalized to scenarios for which the receiver of the bite will not wear equipment. Remember, you're training for scenarios for when the dog is going to encounter a quote-unquote decoy, so a real person, and this person is not going to wear equipment, and this person is not going to be a compliant helper, okay? So the recipient of the bite in a real scenario will not be wearing equipment, will not be compliant, will not adhere to a training plan, and will not comply with instructions. They're going to be freaking out. As Franco Angelini, one of the contributors to the book, as he put it, and this is a quote from him, in the police and military working dog community, equipment is a necessary evil. Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Okay, we don't want the dogs fixated on equipment. Now, equipment is going to provide us a vehicle to teach the dog certain skills, but at the end of the day, you're not training for events. You're training for real stuff. So the more generalization, meaning the more you apply what the protection dog learns in different settings, the better. Next part of the book, what is a decoy? Okay, / helper. So what's a decoy? A decoy or helper is the most important member of a protection dog team. It's what makes or breaks a team's progress. It's what makes or breaks a club. It's what will ensure the police or military working dog engages the threat. For simplicity, there will be times in this book in which the decoy or helper will be referred to as him. There are plenty of good female helpers in the industry, both in training and trials, but so that I'm not constantly saying his or hers, or him or her, we're just going to go with him. Okay? So the decoy comes in two categories, as I explained in the terminology section of the book: trial and training. So the decoy / helper comes in two categories: trial or training. Okay, for the training decoy to be effective at his job, he must be a good dog trainer first. So remember, this is a training decoy, a training helper. For him to be effective, he has to be a good dog trainer. It's the understanding of time, consistency, motivation, body language, and operant as well as classical conditioning that makes a good training decoy. As a training decoy, you're really looking at little bits and pieces that need to be improved, and you're also thinking into the future. Like, you have the end in mind, and your job is to carve out that picture for that individual dog with as many details as you can to try to get that dog to that point. This is me slightly deviating for the book just to add a little bit more clarity as to what a training decoy is, okay? So a training decoy needs to be for a training decoy to be a good training decoy, they need to be a good dog trainer. They need to understand some basic principles. This is how the decoy can take dogs from different breeds, temperaments, maturity levels, genetic and individual tendencies to their highest potential. There are decoys out there, or training helpers, that don't like certain dogs. I've seen them, I've worked with them, and they're like, no, I don't like that type of dog. It's understandable. They don't want to waste their time. But sometimes it's not always that they don't like. Sometimes they just don't have the patience, or they don't have the skill to work with certain dogs, right? They like dogs that they can make a bunch of mistakes on and the dog will recover. Of course, we want those dogs. But you should be able, as a training decoy, the more you're able to work with different temperaments, the better off you are. Okay, training decoys come in different forms. They're tall, short, thin, athletic, younger, older, not very athletic. Barbellone recounts his early experience in Belgian ring, in which he was exposed to 60 and 70-year-old decoys, training decoys. When you, if you have the book, when you get to that portion of the interview with Barbalone, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. A training decoy does not need to be a trial decoy. Oh, he doesn't even need to be trial decoy fit. So trial decoys, okay, trial decoys on the other hand, they are the testing vehicle for the teams. So trial decoys, they are responsible for showcasing the handler's preparation in a trial. They're also showcasing the dog's character or exposing their weaknesses, okay, in one event. So a trial decoy is different than a training decoy, as I mentioned earlier. So trial decoys are courageous, agile, fit, and knowledgeable of the sport they represent. A trial decoy may encounter about 20 dogs or more in a single weekend and must maintain the same intensity level for each dog. A trial decoy does not need to be a good training decoy. A trial decoy just needs to be athletic, and they need to understand the sport, they need to understand the rules, and they need to be safe. So that's the difference between a trial decoy and a training decoy or helper. Now we're going to go to a part of the question in which we go into now more into the motivation of being a helper. Okay, so the section of the book is, why do you want to be a decoy? What is it about decoy work that catches your attention? If you're reading this book, there's a good chance, okay, if you're listening to this audio, there's a good chance that you are intrigued by helper work, that you like the idea of doing helper work, that you want to get started, or that you are already getting started. So what is it that motivates you? What is it that you want from being a helper? So all the successful decoys I've talked to, they had to ask themselves this question early in their career. Okay, myself included. To some, they are put in a position where decoying will give them the best advantage to help them do their job and make them better. That was the case with Franco Angelini. On his interview, that's one of the things he said. He said that it was just a position that he got, and for him to get better, he had to get better as a helper. Some were groomed into it at a young age by the influence of a parent or a mentor. This was the case with Sean Thankachan from Canada. On his interview, you will also see that. And some of them realized decoy work looked too good to pass up. Okay? So, sometimes decoy work just looks cool. It's very fun to watch and very fun to be part of. Decoy work has all the appeals of a badass job. It really is pretty cool. It's physical. It provokes interest and admiration, and it's an adrenaline rush type of activity. So you're definitely going to get an adrenaline rush with some of the scenarios, at least. Okay, whether you're a training helper and you're practicing some high-speed stuff, or whether you're a trial helper, lots and lots of adrenaline rush there with some of the scenarios that can be pretty complex. Especially as a trial decoy, you don't even know the dogs. You go to a trial, there are plenty of dogs that you're going to be catching that you don't even know them. You don't know what their training is like. You know very little about the dog. Like each decoy interviewed in this book, you have to determine why you want to be a decoy. Without a good why, it's just, you're not going to last. Even worse, you'll be lousy at it. I get people that contact me that they're like, I want to do decoy work, and they don't show up, or they show up for a little bit and then they don't want to do it. Okay, there's a lot of things that go into it, and if you're not into it, you really shouldn't be into it. It's kind of a thankless job at times. I'm deviating from the book here, but I'm telling the truth. Sometimes it's kind of a thankless job. You're putting your body through a lot of freaking work, and you're getting sore, and you're going and going. You're going twice, sometimes 3 times a week, and you're working a lot of dogs. And some people, yes, are very appreciative, and I love seeing the progress. But some people, don't even really look at it more than, oh, thanks. And then you just have to do it for you. Like when I do it, there are so many times where I'm just like, what's the point? Why am I doing this? That's the truth. Okay, I'm being very honest here. So there are times where I'm like, why am I doing this? Like these people like barely acknowledge it. They're like, oh yeah. I did my little my little club fee, which is like ridiculously low, okay, for club fees. Because we're not doing club to get rich. We're doing it so that I can also train my dog, so that I could get more experience, so I can help people out. And some of these people that just look at it as, yeah, cool, thanks. Not a huge deal. They're not, they're not as invested as you are as a helper. And sometimes it can be a very thankless job. And I know helpers, decoys that run clubs that they just get burnt out. I was just talking to a buddy of mine not too long ago. And that's one of the things that he does. He gets excited. He gets motivated. He told me, he's like, sometimes I just get burnt out and I just have to disappear for a little bit. It can be a thankless job. It really can be. I've been running a club for some years now. And now I'm at a point where I have some really nice members, some very consistent members. But occasionally, I really do ask myself, why am I doing this? And I always have my why. I'm doing this for me, okay? I'm doing this so that I can have my dog, so my dog can have an atmosphere where he can also train. That's why I have a club. It's never, so that I could get the admiration. It's never so that I could be the star. It's never so that I could get like lots of money. You're not gonna be getting lots of money from this. It's just something that sometimes can feel like a thankless job. But I have a good why. And the people that have been doing it for a while, they also have a good why. Because if you don't really have a good why, just like everything really, and you just go, oh, that looks pretty cool, you're just not gonna last. It's gonna wear on you. You're gonna get achy. You're gonna get sore. You're gonna get disappointed, and you're just gonna be lousy. You're just not gonna last. I've seen so many helpers, so many decoys with the right intentions just don't last, and I don't blame them. I really don't blame them. It's a lot that you're putting into it, and if you do it long term, you're bound to have some sort of aches, maybe even injuries. So you have to have a good why. If you're someone who's new at this or has never done this but want to get started, I will give you a warning. Decoy work is more than just putting on a sleeve or a bite suit and taking bites. Anyone can do that. So you're either a helper or you're just a prop. Props are not important. So if I just tell you, hey, come over here and put this jacket on, I do that with my members. I'm like, I just need you to wear this jacket. You don't even have to catch the dog. I just need you here so that I could do some obedience and some decoy neutrality. Or if I do need my dog to bite somebody new, I'm just gonna be like, hey, can you just put the jacket on? I'm gonna pretty much work the dog. I just need you to wear the jacket and or the sleeve and take the bite, and I will do kind of the rest with my dog. Okay. So if you're just a prop, that's what you want to do. That's perfectly fine. But you're just a frame to hold a sleeve or a suit if you're just a prop, right? And I don't trust props. You can't trust a prop. I have to like micromanage. Like if I don't really trust your decoy skills, but it's kind of one of those things I'm like, I need my dog to bite somebody else other than just me, right? Then I'm gonna have somebody, one of my club members, go, hey, put this on, take a bite. And if I don't trust their ability, I'm going to be right there on top of them. So you really can't trust the prop. So if you want to be a helper, you have to be more willing to learn. There is more work to have you in the field if you're just a prop than it's worth. So if you don't want to be a prop, you need to really learn. You have to put in the time. You have to watch and learn. You have to ask questions. And some trainers, they would even rather do their own bite work on their dogs than use a prop, and I don't blame them. Okay, I've done a lot of my own bite work to help my dog overcome little things, just in prey drive. That's another huge debate. I'm not gonna get into that, but sometimes I trust myself, and I'm like, I'm gonna do some of it myself. Some people are huge anti doing your own bite work. As long as you're doing it in prey and in play mode, not a huge deal. I wouldn't go into the fence at all with your own dog. That is a bad idea. But just doing grip work, that's just basically like playing tug with your dog. Okay. So sometimes I find myself doing that because I want my dog worked a certain way, but I can't do that the entire time. I have to have my dog on other people. And having my dog on people that are not very experienced, it's a pain. So you don't want to be a prop. If you want to be a helper, if you picked up this book and you're listening to this audio, you want to learn. You want to be better than just a prop. Okay. Running a protection club myself, periodically, I will get a message from someone who wants to learn to decoy because the videos that I post make it look pretty badass, right? People post videos of their protection training, and it looks pretty cool, looks pretty badass. And the appeal of working with protection dogs is very exciting. It's been my experience, and some of the other decoys I've talked to will confirm, okay, that these people show up and immediately want to do the flashy stuff, like, oh, hey, let me, I want to do that. I'll do that bite. Like, no, you don't even know what you're doing. You're gonna have to like put in the time. You're gonna have to wait your turn. You're gonna have to show that you know what you're doing, that you have an idea, at least, of what you're doing, and that you are safe. And I have to trust you before I start doing the high level stuff. And some of these people show no patience. They don't realize that it takes an amount of trust for us to send a dog on you that we're training. So if the thought of waiting and being patient before taking your first bite seems annoying, don't even bother contacting us. You're just a pain. You're just a hassle. Okay? You have to show patience, willingness to learn before we put you in a suit, before we give you a sleeve. It may be a meeting later. Okay? It may be towards the end of the meeting. Depending on what we want you to do. Or maybe several weeks or months later, depending on the club, depending on who's running the club. Okay. The other thing we have noticed is these people who show interest will quit after a few weeks because it's just an option for them. Again, I don't blame anybody for not being into this. I mean, who is into this? Not that many people. Okay. And for you to be into this long term, that's even less people. Okay, if it's just an option for them, there is no desire to pursue it once the magic has worn off, once there is no flashiness. So there are two common reasons many people think they want to be decoys and realize they don't actually want to decoy. Again, this all goes back to the why. Why do you want to be a helper? Okay. So it is why, right? That's the reason. So either people don't want to wait, they don't want to wait to do some of the helper work, or they just get worn out and they're like, I'm not really into it. It's just an option. Those are the two reasons why people don't last. People that want to learn supposedly, but they don't really want to stick around. So the why is the important thing. To me, it was because when I started, it looked pretty badass. It looked pretty cool. That's what caught my attention. And as I became a better dog trainer, my why became because I enjoyed the progress of each dog. That's why I still do it. That's one of the reasons I still do it. I'm fascinated by progress. Whenever I see a dog go from very immature, they don't know what they're doing. They're conflicted because maybe the trainers or the handlers did not give it a good start. And I can troubleshoot that, and I can do some damage control, and I can see the dog now progress nicely. To me, I just get such a thrill out of that. I love seeing those progress. And again, it gives me a vehicle to stay consistent with my training of my sport dog. So that's why I do. As of this moment, that why has kept me going with the club, because there have been times where I'm like, why am I even doing this? This is so thankless. Just such a thankless job at times. But my why keeps me going. Okay. Next part of the book, how do you get started? So now that you've figured out, hopefully, your why, now let's talk about what route do you take? How do you get started? And this is the same question I asked every helper, every contributor to this book, all the decoys that contributed to this project, I asked them the same question: What caught your attention about decoy work? How did you get started? So let's talk about this. I love this question. Every authority in this industry had to take their first step, and they all have a unique reason, and they all have unique reasons and ways that you will become more acquainted with when you get to the interviews. There are a few ways to get started once you find out your why. Okay. One way is the dog training school way, the dog training school route. That's one way to get started. Some dog training schools include decoy work in their curriculum. A few of the people I interviewed were introduced to decoy work through that route. Jerry Bradshaw and Tom Rose both run and operate their dog training schools containing helper work in their curriculum. So Jerry Bradshaw runs Tar Heel Canine. He has decoy work in his curriculum. Tom Rose, same thing. He has the Tom Rose School for dog trainers, and he also has decoy work, helper work in his curriculum. Dave Croyer was introduced to decoy work through a dog training school. My introduction to decoy work, and the reason I fell in love with it, was because of a dog training school. That's my personal experience. That's how I got introduced to it, and that was my route. Okay, if you've read some of my other books, I'm pro dog training schools. That's my personal opinion. I've been to 2 dog training schools, and deviating a little bit from the book, to me, if you find the right school, that is a good route. Okay, so the benefit of getting started through a dog training school is that you hopefully get the proper guidance and safety techniques instead of just winging it or getting the wrong advice. So if you go to a good dog training school that does include this in their curriculum and they actually know what they're doing, then you don't have to wing it. You don't have to worry about getting the wrong advice. Now, some schools don't have the best decoy work curriculum, from what I've heard at least. This is from what I've heard. But I'm not going to include names or any of that. This is something you're going to have to do your research in. But in general, this is a good way. This is a good route. Okay. This, of course, implies the dog training school is a good dog training school. It's exactly what I just said. So I deviated from the book a little bit, and turns out that that was my next line. This implies that the dog training school you're looking at is a good dog training school. I know that some places call themselves schools, but their quote-unquote instructors should be nowhere near a sleeve, yet they teach newbies how to do bite work. So please do your research in that department. I've heard some stories of some schools that do helper work, and they're like completely overlooking safety. Students are getting injured, all kinds of things. Okay, so do your research. Talk to the instructors. Talk to their previous graduates, and kind of get your information that way. The other way to get started is the club route. So the sport club route. Some of the contributors to this book started this way. Okay, there are a few things to consider when you go to this route, when you do it this way. The particular sport you want to pursue, of course, that would be one factor. Okay, so if I want to, the thing is, sport work, you just listen to me talk about the different sports. We have French ring, Mondial ring, PSA. We have IGP, American Schutzen. If you're in the U.S., you don't have to worry about Belgian ring or KMPV. But if you're in the U.S., you have Mondial, French ring, PSA. You have APA, APPDA, Schutzen, or IGP, American Schutzen. You just have so many options. So you can go, okay, well, how do I start? You can look into each sport, or you can go to any club really and kind of get an idea of what each sport entails and how the helper work looks to you. That would be one way, but you have to take into account that there's so many sports out there. Okay, so you want to make sure that you look into that. Another thing that you want to consider if you're going to go the club route is the club's proximity to your location and the type of club you want to learn from. Not every club knows what they're doing. I'm sorry to say that, and some of you that are reading this probably can relate to this. You've been to those clubs that like make you scratch your head. I've had people contact me and they're like, oh, well, what they're doing in this club is they're kicking dogs, they're swinging dogs, they're helicoptering dogs. They're just doing all kinds of shit that they should not be doing with a dog, but they're doing it because they quote unquote can. And their dogs are not progressing. Their dogs look just look terrible. And they just have a club because they have a bite suit and they got some drivey dogs in their area. And so they get together and then they have their club. So you have to make sure that the club you're going to, that at least they have an idea that, of what they're doing, which if you're new, it might be very hard to determine. But one good indicator to me has always been, are they fair to the dog? If it looks ugly, like if you go to that club and it just looks ugly, like you don't feel right. You walk out of there or halfway to the meeting, you're like, oh my, is this correct? Does this make sense? That doesn't seem necessary. If you have this gut-wrenching feeling when you are at that club and you see things being done to a dog that you think to yourself, this can't be right, there's a good chance that's not the right club, because there are a lot of those people that do that. So if I'm new and I'm going to a club and they're swinging dogs, they're kicking dogs, they're just putting dogs in these unsafe situations, the dogs just look like shit, complete garbage, and I go there constantly to learn, what am I going to learn? I'm going to learn bad habits. I'm going to learn to be a shitty decoy. I'm going to learn to push dogs past the point that is not going to help them. So why would I go there? You could go there and you could learn something, but what are you really going to learn? You're going to learn stuff that you're going to have to unlearn. So you have to pay attention to that, okay? So let's get back to the book. Here's what I mean. Let's say after doing your research, you decide you want to get involved in French Ring, but the French Ring club closest to you is 5 hours. You also learned that there is an IGP club 30 minutes away from you. Which one do you go to? Well, you could go, well, no, I want to learn French Ring and drive the 5 hours. Or you could go, well, there's an IGP club 30 minutes away, so I'm just going to go to that one. You decide what you want to do. Again, you should visit them both. You shouldn't necessarily have to pick one. Okay? Would you be willing to travel the 5 hours once or twice a week to learn more about French Ring, or would you be just happy learning from IGP helpers, even though decoy work is completely different from French Ring decoy? They're completely different. Every sport is different. Every protection sport. If you're new at this, if this concept is kind of new to you, sports are very different. It's like me telling you, hey, let's do some team sports, and I could go, well, there is football, there is there is soccer, there is rugby, and they're different sports. They're team sports. They involve a ball, but they're very different. The rules are different. I could even tell you, okay, let's do contact sports. Okay, we could do taekwondo. We could do karate. We could do boxing. All those things. So they're all different. They do involve punching and kicking and all of those things. They do involve contact, but there are different sports with different rules. So protection work is the same way. Every sport is going to be very, very different. So you have to choose, do I just go to the closest one or do I go to the one that seems better? You also have to take into account what I mentioned a few moments ago. What if the club 30 minutes from you is just a shit show? You go there and like dogs are just walking out looking like crap and just does not look good at all. Well, in my opinion, for me at least, I can tell you, I won't go to that club. I'll drive the extra 5 hours so that I could go to the club where I want to start. Okay? It'd be worth it to me to drive an extra 5 hours than to go to the one closest to me if dogs are looking like garbage. So all of those things you want to take into account if you want to go the club route. Okay? One thing that will give you the edge if you go this route is to invest in your own equipment. When I have someone who contacts me to learn about decoy work, helper work, and they are willing to invest money in their own equipment, I'm more likely to want to help them out. Okay? Because they have already shown their commitment by purchasing their own equipment. Not because I need the equipment. I have the equipment I need. I don't need people to bring their equipment. I have all the equipment I need. So it's not about, oh, yeah, please bring your equipment. But if you have your own equipment, that shows me, if you're willing to invest in that, that shows me you're in it for the long term. That shows me that you are very committed, very dedicated. Okay, if somebody contacts me and goes, hey, I want to learn decoy work, I'm like, cool. Well, you can come to my club. You can watch. And based on how you do and how you progress, you can start doing some bite work. Okay? So we show up at these times and these times. Now, if the person only shows up like once every couple of months, no, that's not going to work out. But if that person shows commitment, I'm going to show more commitment to helping them as well. And the more commitment they show, the more commitment I'm going to give them. And having the willingness to invest in your own equipment shows a lot of commitment. So if you choose to go this route, there are some expectations and some things to be aware of. One, be willing to be the lowest man on the totem pole. If you want to get started in decoy work and learn more about the sport and the type of work a club setting can help you with, you are not the star. Okay? If you want to learn decoy work, helper work through the club route, you are not the star. You are the first person to be there at the beginning, helping set everything up, and you're the last person to leave the club to help clean up. If the club decoy or training director needs a clatter stick, you get the clatter stick. I've personally dealt with self-entitled people who want to learn by coming to our club, but instead, all they do is they just watch and bullshit around on the sidelines. They're not watching, they're not paying attention, they're just bullshitting around. And they show occasionally. So those people definitely don't last, right? So they're showing no commitment to the club to wanting to learn. So I'm not going to show them commitment. But the person who wants to learn, like they're right there, like, hey, we'll I can take a bite if you want. Like they're willing to help out and they're willing to listen. You can definitely tell when somebody is willing to listen. Okay? So a club setting is a setting in which every member is helping each other out. That's why the fees are very low when it comes to club fees. People, like, I'm going to rant a little bit, so slight side note from the book. I get a lot of people that want to come to club, and I've turned so many people down because they just want to bullshit around. They want to pay their super ridiculously low monthly or drop-in fee, and they want the works, but they're not committed. They don't want to help out, and they just want their dogs to bullshit around for a little bit. No, like, club is not for that. Okay, if you want to bullshit around, if you want just your dog to get some bites, you're gonna pay more. We're gonna have to set up private lessons so that you can pay me more so that your dog can get some fun bites. But club has to be club. Club has to be for all of us to help each other out. We all show up at the same time. We all leave at the same time. You don't show up for like your little drop-in fee and you get your bites done and then skips over somebody else's turn and then leave when you're done. That's not what club is. If you want that, you have to pay more. Club directors, training directors, don't let people abuse your club like that. Okay? I know clubs that and training directors, club directors that let people run all over them. And they contact me. They're like, dude, I need some help. Just don't let people run all over you. Club is for everybody. Okay? Everybody goes in. Everybody helps each other out. And that's what club is. So if you want to learn if you want to go the club route, you have to realize you're not the star. You're going to be there to help. You're getting an education there. If ideally you find the right club, you're getting an education there, and you have to take it serious. Okay, you have to be valuable. You can't just be bullshitting on the sidelines. Okay, another thing to consider if you're going to go the club route is be willing to wait before you get your first bite. A club decoy or training director might test your patience and dedication before you get your first bite. Okay? Bart Bellone and Michael Bellone, as well as Jerry Bradshaw. Okay, that's kind of the route they take. All right? That's one thing that the Bart says in his interview. He says that when people contact him about club, right away they want to take a bite, and Bart goes, no, that's a no-go for us. Okay, Jerry Bradshaw, same thing. He's not just going to get a green person. Jerry Bradshaw, he's got a bunch of helpers. He has the school, so he has a lot of people that are learning from him, that are learning the right techniques. He's not just going to have some person go, oh yeah, can I go? He's going to make sure that they know their craft. Okay? Incidentally, too, Bart Bellone and Jerry Bradshaw, they waited patiently before they ever got their first bite, decoy-wise. Bart Bellone talks about how he waited for several months outside the fence while he watched his Belgian ring club. He watched for months from outside the fence before he ever got his first chance to take a bite. Same thing with Jerry Bradshaw. He waited patiently. He kept asking, but he waited and waited and waited until he finally got his first opportunity to take a bite. So it takes time to train a new decoy, and spending valuable time teaching a new decoy, and the art of being a helper, only to have this person stop showing up, it's just a tremendous waste of time. So if you're gonna come to club and you're gonna learn, you're like, oh yeah, I want to learn how to decoy. Fine, I'll help you, because in the end, you're gonna help me too. It benefits me if I have a committed person who wants to learn how to decoy, because then I can have you help me with my dog. I can have you help me with the other club dogs. So it's a mutually beneficial thing. But that's the key word. It has to be mutually beneficial. So it takes time to train you. And if it takes me like a lot of time, I'm investing my time in helping you get better at this, and then you just take a hike, and now I just wasted my time. Okay? So you want to make sure that you understand, one, you're not the star. Two, you have to be willing to wait. Okay? And your first bite is definitely going to be on a more experienced dog. It's not going to be on a young dog. It's not going to be on a dog that we're working where you can accidentally mess that dog up. It's going to be on a dog that is already more experienced. They know what they're doing. They're pretty much doing the work for you. Now, if the club doesn't have that dog, you will not be trusted to work the younger dogs. That's another thing that sometimes I've had people say. They're like, even at the school that at this very moment, not for very long, but at this moment, the school that I work at, that's one of the things that sometimes people go, okay, can we work that dog? Well, that dog is kind of young, and you don't quite know what you're doing just yet. So you're going to have to wait. Okay, so like I said before, it takes a level of trust for the training decoy and handler to let a newbie work on that young dog. that needs development, and in some cases, troubleshooting. So we're not just going to let you work the puppies right away. A third factor that goes into it, if you're looking at the club route, is be willing to show up at every meeting. That shows commitment again. Okay, unless the club is desperate for a decoy, they're not likely to pour years of experience in teaching a person who half-asses club and only shows up periodically when it's convenient. We have to get to know you and your level of commitment. You also have to remember that learning proper decoy work is not gained a couple of times a month. You're going to have to, again, watch, ask questions, and put in your time. Okay, the other route is going the agency route. Now we're talking about how to get started again. Okay, so we talked about the school route. We talked about the club route. The other way to get started is the agency route. Franco Angelini and Josh Kirby, contributors to the book, they both got their introduction to decoy work while in uniform. This is actually how a lot of people get started in protection training. For some, it develops into a passion. For others, it stops as soon as their position or rank changes. Because if you go the agency route and you get into this position, you're not in that position forever. At some point, you get promoted, or you get switched to a different unit, or to a different type of duty. Now, that's over. Okay. So that's kind of how it goes with the agency route. This is certainly a way to get started. It may not be the route of choice for most, but it's certainly a way to get started. It's also worth mentioning that it is one way to get started. Okay, I want to add, however, that it does present some challenges. You may not be anywhere near a dog for several years before you get to decoy. So if you think to yourself, I want to be this is a way that a lot of people get sucked into this. Like, I want to be a canine handler. So what they do is they'll join an agency, or they'll join the military, and they'll go, I want to join so that I can be a canine handler. And they don't realize that your first thing out of the academy, okay, is not going to be like, hey, here's your dog. Good job with the academy. Here's your dog. Now you're going to be a canine handler. They're going to be spending time on the streets first. And then they'll put in for canine, and then maybe they'll get it. So it's not a guarantee. Now in the military, I believe the Army at this point has an MOS, a specialty, for which that is a job, so to speak. So to be frank, other than that, it's not even a guarantee that you will be even assigned to a dog unit. So you have to be careful about the agency route. And Franco Angelini, when I talked to him about this, he even told me, he was like, yeah, there is no guarantee that you're going to get it if you go that route. Okay. Other than, again, the exception being the military ratings, the military specialties for which having a dog is part of the specialty. Potential obstacles. In this part of the book, I'm going to be talking about what you could expect to encounter as you get started in your journey to either starting decoy work or maybe sharpening your decoy skills, because it does take dogs. It does take somebody else to help you with this in the process of becoming good with the mechanics. Okay, so potential obstacles. Included in this section, I included this section because there's a possibility that you may encounter some obstacles in your quest. For the most part, if you have enough interest and you have a good enough why, there are no obstacles, but rather just part of the process. Okay, this is something I experienced. The other guys that I talked to that are in this book, they told me the same thing. There's always some little bit of waiting. It's just not as easy as going, hey, I'm going to put on the suit, put on the jacket, and just learn how to do this, and all the doors just opened up. Okay, except for the one person that did say this was Franco Angelini. For Franco Angelini, his words were, this was smooth sailing for him. But for everybody else, there is some sort of waiting here and there. That they don't necessarily, not all of them necessarily called it obstacles, but there is definitely some part of the process for which they had to show patience, for which they had to show dedication, commitment, for where they had to overcome some minor issues, whether they were fear or lack of trust. That's one of the things that you have to be aware of. Okay, you're not just gonna contact a club and go, "Hey, I'm here to be your new decoy," and then people are just gonna be like, "Okay, here's everything you need." There is some waiting, there is some patience on your part, and there is a level of trust that the people have to have on you in order for them to start trusting you with their dogs. Okay? So it is one of those things that you have to show patience for. For me, it was definitely waiting and just me being on the sidelines, just kind of waiting, watching. But that's another thing I did. I didn't just BS around. I was very, very focused on just watching every team. So when it was another teams, when a team would be working their dog in protection work, I was studying the moves of the dog, the helper. I would even think to myself, how would I have done that differently? But this again takes interest, takes a good why, and it takes a level of passion that would drive you to do that. Most people, they don't do that. This is my experience. Most people don't want to do this. They want to, but they don't really want to. I've had people that go, yeah, I want to learn how to decoy. Most of the time, they really don't. They just you just watch for a little bit, but they're not as interested. Maybe I'm just too interested. Some of the people that I talked to that are in this book, I mean, they had a very similar experience. They were very, very into it to the point of almost maybe not obsession, but to the point where they just had to absorb and watch with a lot of dedication before it was their turn. This was the case definitely with Barbalone. This is the case with Jerry Bradshaw as well. So there is a little bit of pushback sometimes as part of the obstacle, as part of the process. Aches and pains. Next chapter of the book is aches and pains. This is absolutely going to be part of the journey. If you're new to helper work or you're starting to show interest in this type of work, I want to bring up the fact that this is a contact sport. Just flat out, this is a contact sport. I've had people that sometimes they're like, "Oh, I want to take a bite for fun." Like, I just want to take a bite for fun. Can I take a bite? Just they give their phones to somebody to watch so that they can record, and they just take their first bite and they just fall flat on their face. Not even like a long, crazy bite. They were just not prepared. Yeah, I'll take a bite. This is a little bit more complex than just a photo op for you to show off. Okay? You have to realize that this is a contact sport. If you're not prepared, if you're not coordinated and you are kind of weak and you're not very athletic, you have to be aware that there is a possibility that you're going to end on the ground. And it's not always going to feel good, especially if you don't know how to fall. That in itself is a skill. So you have to know this is a contact sport. If you're going to do this long term, if you're thinking about doing this, you're definitely going to fall. You're going to twist. You're going to pull some things. So you might have some little injuries here and there, or you might have an accumulation of injuries that eventually lead to a big blowout. So be very aware that could be the case. Okay, if you've been decoying for some time, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You can definitely relate to this. And you probably suffer from some mild to moderate pain. I mean, I've had people tell me, no, I'm not really in pain. But there's just some moderate, some mild, at least some sort of nagging, something. If you do helper work regularly, it's just kind of bound to happen. Some of the following areas, this is where you're gonna feel your body. This is where some of the aches you're gonna feel in your body are gonna be for some of these areas. Your knees, your elbows, your shoulders, your lower back, your ankles. I'm telling you from experience, these are the points where you're going to have some minor aches here and there, or some more permanent aches as you do this for several years. Now, if you're thinking, why would anybody want to do this for so many years, in and out, week in, week out, over and over and over? I don't know why. I don't know why I do it. I just know that to me, it's a sense of duty, and to me, it's a little bit of a weird obsession type of thing. So that's how it is for me. And I know a lot of people feel the same way. And other people go, I would never do that. I have people that tell me, I don't know how you do that. I would never do that. And people tell me, oh man, I got this ache and this type of ache. I could never do that. As though I don't have any aches. I have all those aches, if not more, but I just do them anyway. I understand it is part of the process. So in IGP or American or Schutzhund and an American Schutzhund, the emphasis is on getting a full, powerful, and calm grip from the dog, and pulling on the helper. So the grip in Schutzhund or IGP is pulling. It's a pulling grip. So it is the training decoy's job to encourage this dog to counter or pull. So teaching a dog to pull, if you're going to do helper work in IGP or Schutzhund or American Schutzhund, you're going to be teaching and encouraging these dogs to pull. This you're going to feel on your back. You're absolutely going to feel on your shoulders. You're going to feel it on your elbow. All the other protection sports, which involve a bite suit, they're not pulling grips that are encouraged, but they're pushing grips. So the higher score is going to go to the dog that has a full mouth, plus they're pushing into the grip. That's what we want to see. Okay, so the pushing grips is what we want to see from these dogs on the other sports other than IGP and American Schutzhund. Guess for this, you're going to need proper genetics, but you're also going to need training to be able to teach this. So it's the pulling dogs that are going to give you the backaches, not the pushing, not as much. PSA's primary target, so I'm talking about a PSA, the PSA sport. The primary target for PSA is the left side of the body, primarily the left bicep. Now people ask, why is it the left bicep? Why isn't it the other parts of the body? Just real quick, I want to address this. In PSA, we're running, sprinting at the dog, and the dog is sprinting at us. So we have a dog running at well over 30 miles an hour, and you have a helper sprinting at the dog. You're not waiting. It's not on a sleeve. It is in a bite suit. So for this to go smooth, there has to be a level of predictability here. So if I expect the left traditional target on PSA, if I expect the left and your dog goes center mass, you can think to yourself all you want, the decoy needs to be ready. But at the end of the day, your dog is the one that's going to suffer too. If I expect the left bicep and your dog hits center mass, or your dog hits me on the chest, or your dog hits me on the right leg, I might not be ready for that. And though, yes, this can be painful for the helper, ultimately, you're risking injuring the dog. That's why we have this component of predictability in PSA. So the left target is the primary target here. The left side of the body is the primary target, so whether it's the left bicep or the left leg. It's not like in French ring where the helper is just waiting for the dog. So the primary target in PSA is going to be the left bicep. And I can tell you from experience, I definitely feel the aches on my left shoulder. Those constant hits on the left shoulder over and over, on the left bicep over and over and over. That is going to do a number on your elbow. Not so much on your elbow because it's on the bicep, but that is going to do a number on your shoulder, your back, even my neck. Even I feel it on my neck. My left bicep is more developed than my right bicep. And my left shoulder is always achy. Not always achy, but if I do feel the ache, it is going to be on my left shoulder. In French ring, you're essentially teaching the dog to stay one step ahead of the dodge or the skeeve. This means the pivoting leg will be the desired target or center mass. Okay, so as a decoy, this will eventually put pressure on your knees and your ankles. I was doing some French ring decoy work for my friend Jake when he was recovering from surgery. So I was helping him out with his clients, and it was also an opportunity for me to learn helper work, and it was great. I mean, I learned a lot, and he taught me a lot of very valuable things. But I gotta tell you, I definitely felt this on my ankles. Okay, all the pivoting and turning, the quick-footedness that has to go into French ring. I mean, these guys are very athletic. They have to be very, very athletic for some of the maneuvers that you have to do. So I started to feel my ankles. I started to feel it on my knees. So it's just like, again, we're going back to this is a contact sport. Okay, so you're gonna have aches and pains. As Dr. Burrow, my chiropractor, says, quote, "You guys take blunt forces with your bodies. It is a totality of injuries in these training situations." End of quote. Going on to the next chapter called potential injury. So we're continuing with the theme of the fact that this is a contact sport. Now let's address some potential injuries. I want this book to be as transparent about the craft of helper work as possible. Okay, so I want it to be as transparent as possible. As someone being interested in helper work, or someone who is currently a helper, it is important to be aware of the very real possibility that something more serious could happen. Now we're talking about injuries, not aches and pains. So injuries come in different forms. The previous section goes over minor forms of injury, like the microscopic tears. Those are the aches and pains. The type of work we do is very strenuous on the body. It may not seem like it at times, but the micro tears constantly happen in the field. These micro tears manifest themselves in the form of aches. Then you have big injuries. These go beyond aches and pains. The bigger injuries can come in one single event, such as a live bite or a torn knee, or the breaking of a bone, or they can be the result of an accumulation of smaller injuries and tears that go unchecked until it becomes a bigger injury. So you could have the injury where one single event, like you get a fracture, you get a tear, you get the puncture, or you get the slower buildup of constant aches and pains. Your body doesn't have time to heal, and you're constantly re-injuring it until one day you blow your knee out. Okay, so I've heard of this happening. I've talked to a couple of the decoys that are in this book that was their experience. And it is that type of injury too. Okay, so these are potential injuries that could happen. Okay, there are a few key things that have to be done greatly and to greatly reduce these mishaps, these injuries. So here are some things that will reduce the chance of an injury. Okay. One thing that will reduce an injury is the pre-training brief. The pre-training brief. This is done with the handler before they pull their dog out. This is when you, the handler, and any helpers on the field get together before the dog is pulled out, and you go over what is going to get done and how it's going to get done. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do this when the handler is already out with the dog, because then as you try to explain things to the handler, the dog is going crazy, and now the handler is focusing on the dog, they're focusing on you, and they just can't focus. So they can ask questions. So it's just much more distracting when they have their dogs out. So it's best to just have the pre-training brief before you do the session. Very quickly go, hey, what do you want to do? What do you want to work on? Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. This is what you're going to do, and this is how we're going to go about it. If I have a helper to be there assisting me or assisting the handler, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to have the helper in the field as I go through this pre-training brief. This doesn't have to take a long time. It's just a quick period of time where you can address the main objective of that training session, so everybody's on the same page. What you're trying to prevent is for anyone to be surprised on the field. You don't want surprises on the field. Surprises are not good. Okay? It can be very distracting and hard to understand when trying to explain something very important to the handler, but they're busy with their dog. Doing a pre-training brief is probably the most important injury preventative step. I even go as far as addressing the worst case scenarios. So I'll even go, okay, so if this happens, helper, this is what I want you to do. Handler, this is what I want you to do. People watching, this is what I want you to do. So if I foresee that the session could potentially go wrong, I will even go there. That way we know what to do if that happens. Okay, so imagine I'm working with a new team that is more advanced, and normally they train different. They train in a different club. So if I'm working with a team that is more advanced and they're training in a different club and they're just kind of visiting me to get more exposure with their dog, in that case, our pre-training brief consists of me asking the handler what they want me to do. Okay, so if this is a team that I don't see very often, and they have their own training program, their own training plan, then on the pre-training brief, they're going to tell me what they expect of me. Now, if it is crazy and out of hand and risky and it doesn't make sense, it's just more risk than benefits, I'm not going to do it. I'll suggest something else. But for the most part, that's not the case. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're all on the same page. Now, the next thing you can do to prevent injuries is the equipment check. Check the equipment. Okay? I have to be honest with you. Sometimes I'm pretty relaxed about this, but I've had my opportunities, my times where doing equipment check did prevent something from going bad. And I've also had times where equipment broke and now things potentially go bad. So you have to make sure you use the right tool for the job. Okay, so equipment check is very important, and make sure that you use the right tool for the job. One of my biggest pet peeves is to see the use of a tool for an exercise it wasn't meant to accomplish, that it wasn't designed to do. So you want to make sure that the equipment that you're using makes sense. Like, I'm not going to have somebody with their harness and they have a tab leash or a traffic lead, and that's how they're posting up with their dog. That doesn't make sense. That traffic lead was not designed to be attached to an agitation harness. Okay. Also, I have to have the right type of harness. It has to be an agitation harness if we're going to do bite work, not an ID harness, not a no-pull harness. Okay. All the equipment has to be appropriate and has to be designed for what we're going to do. I mean, occasionally I will change that rule. Like, for example, I have a toe strap, a pretty heavy duty toe strap, and I use that as my back tie. So the toe strap was not meant to be used as an agitation back tie. It was actually designed to haul very heavy equipment. So those are some times in which I'll use tools that were not designed for the original purpose, that were designed for a certain purpose, but are not being used for that specific purpose. But I will only do that if the tool has a huge benefit to it, and it doesn't bypass safety. Okay, so that's one that I will sometimes compromise a little bit in, but it's erring on the side of caution. The other thing to keep in mind is that even good equipment can fail. I have seen this, guys, and I've experienced this, and I've had close calls because good equipment, big names, okay, big names. I'm not gonna say names here, but name brands that if I said the name brands, you would be like, no way, no freaking way, not that company. Yes, the big companies that provide equipment for protection work, that have a reputation, a good reputation. I have seen those just go to shit. And I've had those equipment, like those harnesses, on several occasions break. Fairly new harnesses from this big company completely break. Now, I'm not going to mention the name of the company here in this audio. If you are interested, send me a message and I will tell you the brand, because I don't want to shit on anybody here. But that's a company, even though it has a huge name, I don't care. I do not care that this company has a huge name, and it's been in business, and it's been with the police, the law enforcement and military, and it's been, their brand of choice for years. I don't care. I will never get any agitation equipment from that company, regardless of how big the name is. But I'm not gonna say it here. If you're interested, if you're curious, send me a message and I will tell you which one it is. But it's very disappointing. So I don't have any faith in that equipment. So always check equipment. But even once you check the equipment, you have to again realize that equipment is always subject to failure. So be aware that this could happen. But doing an equipment check reduces the possibility of that happening. Okay? So you also want to maintain your equipment. That's the thing. You also want to maintain your equipment. Even good equipment, if you don't take care of it, it's going to affect its workability. It's going to affect its working load. So you have to make sure that you maintain your equipment. Another thing that will reduce the chances of greatly reduce the chance of injury is getting better at your craft, getting better as a helper. This is the other aspect of injury and accident prevention is you. You have to be 100% attentive to what the dog is doing. You have to understand body language and what the handler is doing. Like when I'm doing helper work, I'm not only paying attention to the dog, I'm paying attention to the handler. Does the handler know what they're doing? Are they nervous? Are they maybe too emotionally distressed? Whatever the case might be. Are they drinking? I will not do bite work with somebody who's drinking on the sidelines. I just don't. I don't do that. I don't. That's not for me. Okay. But yeah, that's the thing. You have to be aware of everything. The dog, the handler. You have to really get better at this too as a helper. So the pre-training brief is a great step in the right direction, but sometimes the handler doesn't fully understand your instruction, and sometimes they're too shy to ask for clarification. Sometimes the handler gets so focused on their dog that they forget what they were supposed to do. So understanding body language, the dogs and the handlers, allows you to quickly make adjustments to your training plan at a moment's notice. There are plenty of times where I'm doing helper work and instantly I go, all right, we got to stop. we have to work on something else. This is the thing that we now have to work on. You have to be able and willing to make changes like that on the fly for the sake of the dog, for the sake of the handler, and obviously for your sake too. Okay, part of getting better at your craft is also learning to take charge of the evolution when the handler is violating the training plan without consulting. If a helper starts doing some just things that they shouldn't be, that affects the safety of me and people there at the club, would immediately you have to take charge. You have to tell them, we're not doing this. Put your dog away. You got to get the right equipment. I can't work like this. I've had members that have, I've had people rather that have come to club, and they're either drunk, high, or emotionally distraught. And these are not regulars. These are not members. Okay, people that sometimes would drop in, and I've gone to them and I said, "Hey, dude, what's going on? Are you on something?" Whatever the case might be, either, I've been drinking, or I'm on this medication, or I'm just really upset. I'll tell them, I can't work your dog. I can't work your dog. This is going to violate safety. Okay? For the dog, the handler, myself, the members watching, so we're not going to risk any of that. So if the handler wants to do something exotic for the sake of videos and pictures, I will not oblige, okay? When I work with somebody, we're not doing it for photo ops. We're doing it for the dog. So you don't want safety to be violated at all. So if people want to do that, they can do that on their own. They can pay somebody who wants to do that. I personally don't want to work with those people. Okay. If you're a new decoy, you will probably be decoying under the supervision of a more experienced helper. It is your job to do exactly as your mentor says. However, if you notice that this person is continuously violating safety protocol, get the hell out of there. If you're learning from a mentor and this mentor is constantly putting you at risk, constantly doing crazy shit just to kind of test their dog, to kind of test you, and it's constantly violating safety protocol, you need to get away from these people. I've seen people go, "Oh, let's do a call off with no equipment." Now, that's a huge violation of trust. If you're telling me to do that, it's a huge violation of safety protocol, and it's very idiotic. So you have to be careful who you're learning from as well. And you have to be very, very aware. Safety is a top priority here. You don't want to get bit or somebody to get bit to the point where now they need reconstructive surgery and months of recovery. You need to stay away from these people if they're constantly violating safety protocol. Okay? I hate to be the one to crap on your rose-colored fantasy of what decoy work is, but you need to be aware that sometimes the shit does hit the fan. And even if you take all preventative steps, the pre-training brief, the equipment check, all of that, here are some things that could happen, even if you do everything right, okay? Let's say you did the pre-training brief, you did the equipment check, you're getting better at your craft. Whatever you do all of those things, still the crap can hit the fan. Here are some things that could happen. Live bites. Live bites are something that could happen. These are real bites. Live bites are real bites, are not intended or planned, and it involves skin. This could be a result from a loose dog, equipment failure, or decoy or handler error. Or just plain bad luck. Maybe you were just not lucky. Okay, live bites are rare if you take the proper precaution, but they do happen. I've gotten live bites before, and it's been operator error on my part. I've gotten live bites before. I've gotten nailed. So in training, so it does happen. When this happens, remember not to scream, as this could make things worse. Okay? You have to make sure you keep your cool as much as you can. And if it's not happening to you, if it happens to somebody else, you have to snap out of it. Sometimes what happens, people freeze. I've seen it happen. I've seen people get bit, just live bites, and the handler just completely freezes. And then I got to snap the handler out of it. And I've had it happen to where even somebody with more experience, they froze. And then now, we have to take action. So that does happen. You have to be very careful that it doesn't happen to you. Okay. Now, if a live bite does happen, if it happens to you, to a member, the handler, you have to make sure you help them out. If you have the equipment, like the sleeve of the jacket, you want to make sure that you jump in and maybe distract the dog by motivating him to bite you instead. If you have the jacket or the suit or the sleeve, to minimize the damage to the handler or whoever this dog is doing a live bite on. Okay, but if it does happen and you don't have that, just choke the dog out. You don't want to pull. Like if I have a dog biting on its handler, and I just grab the dog and start pulling, that is going to make the damage way worse. Because if that dog is biting on somebody's leg or somebody's arm, and I start pulling this dog away from that person, they're just going to start tearing. They're going to bite harder, or they're going to bite even more. So I'm going to go right for the neck, and I'm going to tighten whatever I have on that dog. If it's a belt, I'm going to run the belt through the dog's neck, and I'm going to just restrict just enough oxygen to let that dog try to take a breath, at which point it will release. That is your best bet, because just pulling the dog away will only make the bite worse. So you have to be very aware of this. All right, the next thing that could happen, even if you're careful, is the next type of injury is joint or soft tissue injury. Your joints are the workhorse of your body when it comes to helper work. You're taking impact and pressure over a long period of time in a way that is not even natural. It's very uneven and hard for your body to handle. Okay, the aches and pains I talked about previously are your body's way of telling you that micro tears are taking place. If you don't take the time to condition your body, work on a healthy diet, lifestyle, and give your body the appropriate rest it needs, an injury to your tendons may result, or worse, your joints may be severely compromised. In decoy work, the joints that tend to take their toll are the ankles, the knees, the elbow, the shoulder, and the lower back, depending on the sport. I've talked to decoys that have suffered from more serious injuries to their joints. You must learn to recognize your body's signal and learn the appropriate injury preventative measures. Joint hyperextension, twisted ankles, rotator cuff damage, herniated disc, tendonitis are all things that could happen due to prolonged decoy work. So again, remember, this is a contact sport. It's a contact sport for you as the helper. It's a contact sport for the dog. It's a contact sport for the handler. But especially you as the decoy. Now we're going to move onto the next chapter called Physical Fitness and Diet. Physical fitness and diet. The longer you do decoy work, the better you get at it. One of the best things you can do for your decoy career is to take care of your body, because the longer you do it, the better you get at it. Okay, so if you don't take care of your body, you're not going to be doing it very long, which means you're not going to get good at it. Okay, having interviewed and learned from several good helpers or decoys, what they have in common is that they have formed healthy habits that allow them to do this for the long haul. Some of these decoys have different approaches to taking care of their bodies, but their goal is the same. So let's talk about one component here, which is toughness. Toughness. There's certainly an element of, I'm going to do it even if it hurts, in decoy work and helper work. Long decoying days equal dehydration, aches, and exhaustion. A good decoy will give his body some rest, but they will also give their best to every single dog in the training field or the trial field. Toughing it out is definitely a skill you want to develop. The problem with using toughness to compensate for fitness is that it's not good for the long term. You can't just tough it out every time without preparing your body. If you just tough it out every time, it's not sustainable. Your body will suffer. So even though toughness is a good supplement, fitness is what's going to take you to the longer. It's gonna take you to the longer care of your body. Toughness is a good supplement, but it doesn't or it shouldn't replace fitness. Okay, fitness will give you the fuel for long-term decoy work. Toughness is just a supplement. It's important, but it's just a supplement. Okay, the next component here is fitness. You cannot properly adapt your body for the long-term demand of decoy work by just moving on club days. Okay, unless you're in your 20s. But even that is not going to last. You can't just go, I'm going to do decoy work twice a week and that's all I do. You can, it's just not sustainable. You want to make sure you have some sort of fitness ritual, whether it's stretching, yoga, running, something. You have to move more than just that once a week or so. Okay? Because even though you might be all right, it only takes one bad session for it to affect your body. So to do this for a long time and prevent injury, you will have to adopt some physical rituals, some habits, right? Some of the more popular fitness routines followed by many of the helpers are running, stretching, high-intensity training, weight training, biking, and a combination of any of those. All of the decoys that I've talked to, they have some sort of habit that has allowed them to do this long term. Even the ones that are retired, right? When they were big into helper work, they were also doing some sort of exercise on the side. Because of the high number of dogs which some clubs and some trials have, you will have to work on your endurance and your cardio. French ring decoys, man, those guys have to be agile. They have to be fast. They're constantly on their toes. So these guys have got to be fit. Now, fitness itself is a very complicated topic. It is your job to do the research and to see what types of workout routines are best suited for you, your sport, and your condition. Okay? So this book is not going to tell you how to do it. You have to decide what works best for you, your body type, your body, and the sport that you compete in or that you train in. I strongly encourage you to look into a fitness routine if you want to do this longer than just a couple of years or a few months. The next component is nutrition. There are plenty of resources out there on nutrition. This book is not a nutrition guide, but I will bring up that, there are things that do work for the different helpers that I've talked to that have been at it for a long time, for the long term. So it is up to you, the reader, to do your own research and decide the best nutrition plan for you. I can confidently say, and we can all probably agree, that a diet and a lifestyle primarily made up of junk food, high sugars, alcohol, tobacco, drugs is probably not the most sustainable lifestyle for long-term helper work. Maybe short-term, but not long-term. If this is part of your normal daily consumption and it doesn't affect your performance in the field, trust me, it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time. Okay, so now let's talk about another thing in regards to nutrition. Plant-based, do you think that's going to help you? Plant-based? So Ludovic Turbain, big-time French ring decoy. He competes in IPO or IGP now. But Ludovic Turbain, who has been decoying for decades and at 58 years old is still decoying, is on a primarily plant-based diet with the occasional once a month portion of meat. Since switching to a plant-based diet a few years ago, I myself can tell you that I heal faster and that some of my aches and pains have completely gone away. This is now my experience, okay? So yes, Ludovic Turbain, he is on a primarily plant-based diet. So is Jessica Vampola. She's also one of the helpers in the book. She's also on a plant-based diet. And she feels like that's helped her too. You will see that if you read your book, if you read the interview. But I myself, from my personal perspective, I eat primarily plants. By primarily, I mean, I'm telling you, that's really all I'm eating. I eat grains, plants. I don't need animal products. I don't need animals. I wasn't always that way. It's been a few years now. But prior to making that switch, I constantly had these aches and pains on both my knees and my left elbow. Pretty bad. It got to the point where I had to take a break. Like, I actually had to take a break for, I think I remember it being at least a couple of months where I just could not do helper work because my elbow was hurting, my knees were hurting, and it was just all around my knees, the front, the back of my knees, especially the left leg. And it's just, I remember considering not doing this anymore. I remember thinking, man, I just have to cancel the club. I can't do this anymore. So that's kind of how I was teetering at the edge of quitting helper work. But what I did is I switched to an all plant-based diet. And this is just my experience, okay? I know people feel very differently about this. I don't have an agenda to try to turn you into this. But my experience has been that after a few months, actually much, much less, maybe a couple of months of switching to all plant-based, no animals in my diet, the pain on my knees went away. They went away. I didn't have the pain on the back of my knees anymore. Now I still occasionally do feel some nagging on my knees, but very, very little. It's not like it used to be. My elbow, same thing. I mean, occasionally you'll have like a little nag here and there, but compared to what it used to be, not at all. And my activity has actually increased since. It's not like I took it easy. I've been decoying a lot more. I've been more active, and all the inflammation went away. Now, I still have aches and pains, like I said earlier. Okay, my left shoulder does, periodically get sore, but compared to what it used to be, way, way better. Okay, another part that I go over here briefly is the carnivore diet. So I just went over the plant-based diet, and now there's a carnivore diet. This is another thing. You got to do your own research, okay? Obviously, to me, I'm very happy with the plant-based diet. I myself, I'm not going to go on the carnivore diet. It's just not for me. But I don't make anybody wrong for it. You decide what works best for you. When I talked to Jerry Bradshaw, I talked to him on in person when he came to Texas to visit us. I had been talking to him, and he told me that he had been on a primarily carnivore diet for some time. And I'm telling you, I remember when I saw him, when he came to visit, I saw him. And I hadn't seen him in a few years. And I saw him that time. It was like last year, early last year, or the year before that, maybe towards the end of the year. So early last year or the year before that, that's when I had seen him last. But the time before that, which was a few years before that time, he had some weight on him. But when I saw him last time, so early last year, when I saw him after a couple of years, he looked much, much different. He looked much, much healthier. He just looked fitter. He shed all that weight. When I asked him, hey man, what have you been doing? He told me, I've been going on the carnivore diet. So that works for him. And that's what he does mostly. Okay, so I don't know how strict he is with it, but that's one thing that he told me he's been doing. And the difference is pretty obvious. Another thing that falls in the category of nutrition for helper work is supplements. Now, when I talked to Coy, and when Coy kind of submitted his answers to the interview, Coy Fam is training director for a very prominent PSA club in Dallas called Canine Working Dogs of Dallas. This is a big PSA club, huge presence in the sport is Coy Fam's club. His members are racking trophies. They're competing in the high levels. So Coy has an excellent club, and this guy works his ass off. And when I talked to him the last time I saw him, he had about 20 members, and he's working most of those members' dogs. There's one other guy, Tim Akers, who also helps him out, but for the most part, it is him. Okay, so it's really, even if it is just those two, there are times where it's just Tim and Coy, but that's still a lot of dogs for just two decoys. 20 members, 20 dogs for just two decoys. And he told me sometimes it's just all him. It is insane. Okay, and he's not young. So one of the things that he told me, I'm like, how do you, what supplements do you take? What works for you? And he does have some things. He does have some things that he does take. So Coy takes supplements like krill oil, and he also takes turmeric curcumin. Both of these supplements are known for their benefit on joint inflammation. Okay, so that is what works for him: krill oil and turmeric curcumin, and these are both inflammation and joint supplements. But yeah, it is crazy how this guy works so hard, and he's good, and he tells me, I'm like, do you experience any aches and pains? And he's been doing this for a while too, and he tells me, no, like virtually no pain, other than the occasional soreness. But he says, no, really, like no pain. I don't experience any pain. That is impressive. Okay, so you want to check that out? Check it out. Okay, krill oil and turmeric curcumin. That's what helps him. My chiropractor, he's been specializing in. He's been working with athletes and helpers, decoys, for the past 30 years. He recommends vitamin C, vitamin A, zinc, and the B vitamins, as well as glutamine and creatine for ergogenic effect, which means for the enhancement of physical performance. He also stresses the need for a healthy diet. Now, there's another thing that is pretty big right now, CBD. Now, CBD seems to have some pain-relieving properties depending on who you talk to and what quality of CBD you use. Now, some people's bodies respond to it pretty well, while some don't really feel much of a difference. I've also been told that marijuana or THC oil is helpful, but you have to make sure that this is done following your state and your local laws. Okay, or consume it at your own risk. But I have heard that the marijuana. I've never done marijuana, but I have heard that marijuana can help you with joint issues, joint pain. So, as a side note, to end this chapter, so this is what I put on the book. Please note that this is not a book on nutrition. any diet not properly followed or supplements not properly taken can be detrimental to your health. So you have to do your research before following any diet plan presented above. This is a disclaimer. Okay. So next chapter. The next chapter is fear normal? Is fear normal? You're getting bit by dog. I mean, you're getting dogs running at you at full speed. Is it okay to have a little bit of fear? If you are reading this book, it is very unlikely that you're letting fear kind of get in your way. The important thing to remember about fear is that it's actually healthy to have some level of fear when you work with dogs. Okay, not the paralyzing kind where you can't move and you're freaking out, but the kind of fear that reminds you to be safe and ensure the dog returns to the handler in the same shape it came into the field. Many decoys I've talked to reported some level of fear regarding some scenarios. This is perfectly normal, acceptable, and even a good sign that you're not getting complacent. Some reported having no fear. So Barbellone, Franco Angelini, I forgot, one of the other guys too also said, there's really no fear. Okay, now maybe the word itself has a negative connotation to it, and maybe they have a different word that represents what I'm trying to explain here. When I say fear, I don't necessarily mean like the kind that makes you cry and you're nervous. Not necessarily, okay? So it could be like now you're more concerned. It gets you more focused because you know that there is a lot that is resting on your performance. Okay? So maybe they have a different word. In any case, there's certainly a degree of concern for a particular scenario or training session that keeps these professional helpers at the high level of professionalism they're in. Okay? If your fear is, what the hell am I doing here kind of fear, like the paralyzing kind, okay, it's still not out of the ordinary. Think about this. If you're kind of new to this, you likely have these moments more frequently than not. With practice, it gets better because, think about this. We're doing something that is very unnatural. There's a dog chasing you, and you are expecting it to bite you. And you're either waiting for it or you're walking in the direction of the dog. So in the beginning, and even all the way to the end, you still feel those moments that make you go, oh, man, I got to do this exercise. I certainly feel it. Occasionally, I've talked to helpers that are way, way, way better than me that still say things like, "Oh man, like there's one scenario that kind of gives me that weird feeling occasionally." Still, these are people who have been doing this for decades. That are really good at what they do. So fear is normal, okay, or some level of concern is normal. Okay. The other type of fear is, I have a bad feeling about this type of fear. So this is another type of fear is, I have a bad feeling about this. Pay attention to this. It may be your mind playing tricks on you, or it may be that you're potentially in an unsafe situation. Okay. Imagine you've been decoying for a long time. Okay. In that case, you are probably experienced enough to recognize unsafe scenarios and can immediately put a stop to it before you even step in the field. Okay, still, if you're fairly new to this, you're probably following the guidance of an experienced handler, training, or decoy. I've heard experienced decoys, handlers, and trainers who get by on stupid luck for a very long time and involve other people in their stupidity. I've seen it. Like some of the things that sometimes I hear people that they want to do with their dogs, or that they want to do, just stupid, that they're just running on luck, and eventually luck will turn its back on them. So you have to be careful that you don't do any of these things. That you're not even with these people. Okay. you should not be counting on luck. Luck is not a sustainable plan. It's not a strategy. Luck is not a strategy. Hope is not a strategy. Okay, if something doesn't seem right, it violates trust or gambles with the dog's safety and the people involved, I'm going to warn you again, stay away from these people. Okay, I cannot emphasize enough, there are really stupid people out there that have working dogs and have clubs. I hate to say it, but they're really dumb people. Sometimes they're good people, but they'll do things that they truly don't know, and they don't realize how much risk they're putting their dogs in. Injury. Not only that, but they sometimes have no idea how much risk they're putting other people in. You have to be very careful with these people, because even though they're nice people, they can get the dog very seriously injured. Okay. I remember, fear is not always irrational. It's not always your mind playing tricks on you. You're working in an industry in which the margin for error can be quite big, and the wrong move at the right time and the right move at the wrong time can cause severe injuries to the decoy and the dog. Understand what fear is, respect it, and learn to recognize its potential benefits. Okay, another one, complacency. Is complacency normal? So complacency is when you are pretty happy with your performance. It's the opposite of fear. Right? It involves overconfidence and even at times carelessness. Like you're like, I know how to do this. I can do this with my eyes closed. Right? So when you're new at anything, you have to put a lot of focus on what you're doing. Every move is calculated. You're very careful with everything. You're focused. Okay? You are a conscious incompetent at this stage. Like you're consciously incompetent. You know you need to get better at it, basically. You're incompetent, you're not good at it, but you're conscious about it. So you are in the process of getting better at it. So you are aware of what you need to do to get better. Okay? Until you build up the right mechanics, and then you become good at what you do. Once you become good at it, then you become consciously competent. Consciously competent means you are aware that you are now getting better, that you are good at it. Okay, you know that you are now good at it, and you still have to put the effort to do it right and to be good, but you are aware of it. Okay, now what happens in the next step? That's where complacency kicks in. Complacency will kick in once you become unconsciously competent. What that means is you are so good at it that you don't even think about it. You make it look easy. Okay? So you make it look super easy. You don't even think about it. You don't even know how you did it, but you did it really well. It's like, let's go to through these stages when it comes to driving. When you're first learning how to drive, okay, you're learning how to drive, you are conscious incompetent. Okay, you know you don't know how to drive. So as you're practicing your mechanics, you're practicing the gas pedal, the brake pedal, the clutch, the gears, how much to turn the wheel, how much pressure to put on the brakes, all of that. You are working on your mechanics because you're not good at it, but you are very consciously working on your mechanics. Then you move on to the next stage. You learn how to drive. And now you are moving into that automatic stage where you are fluent, right? You are fluent in driving. Now you can switch gears. You are able to press on the brake pedal. You know how much pressure to put on the gas pedal. You know how to turn the wheel, how much to turn the wheel. Now you are conscious, competent. What happens after that? You don't even have to think about it. You just get in the car and then you get to your destination. You don't even remember switching gears. You don't even remember putting on your seatbelt. You don't remember how you even got there, how you maneuver through traffic. You make it look effortless. Does that make sense? Everybody goes through this process with any skill. You make it look easy. That's when people are more likely to get in car accidents, right? That's why you have people that have been driving for like 15 years and they get in a car accident, or they go through a red light. It's happened to me, and I'm like, why did I just go through that red light? I have no idea. What happened was I was so unaware of what I was doing, because I'm good at it, just get complacent. And occasionally you are a little bit careless. That's what happens with dog training as well. That's what happens with helper work. It's when you make it look easy, when you don't even have to put a lot of effort into it. That's when you sometimes get a little bit too careless. And that's what you have to be careful with. Okay? This last stage is where complacency can creep in, and that carelessness will creep in. So you have to be very careful, because this is when things can happen. Okay, the best thing I have found to keep me aware of everything is to be aware that complacency can creep in when you get better. That carelessness can also creep in when you get really good at something. Okay, and another good cure for complacency is actually witnessing or even experiencing a consequence of your carelessness. That's happened to me too, where I've gotten complacent. I've gotten very or careless with my actions, because I mapped it in my subconscious, and I just started doing it without thinking about it, and boom, I get bit. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe I got bit. Oh, I know why. It's because I didn't pay attention. Because I had just already mapped it in my head to a point where I felt very comfortable doing it, and that's when the mishaps happen. And those are the lessons that I remember too. So you have to be careful not to get complacent. Okay? So what I'm saying is, if you're going to be a decoy for a long time, you will experience or witness close calls. It's just going to happen. Okay, when that happens, remember the lesson. All right. Now we're going to be talking about handlers. This is page 45, the handler. The handler is part of your team. There is no decoy work without dogs. If you're going to work and catch dogs, you will be working with handlers. And handlers come in all experience levels and personalities. Working with handlers in the training field is like being in a relationship. It can only work if everyone is on the same page, and communication is key. The training field is no time for disagreements or arguments. But if they have to be resolved, you have to stop what you're doing and get everything straightened out. The handler needs to do their homework. They have to. And they cannot expect the decoy or the training director to do all the work for them only on club days. It's just not going to happen. The handler has got to put in the work. They need to take an interest in other people's training and handling skills. And they also need to have an idea of where they're headed with their training and remember where they left off the last training day. The decoy has so many things to think about between training sessions. So all this responsibility falls on the handler. There are a few different types of handlers, and experienced decoys have worked with all of them. So now we're going to talk about the handlers, okay? One type of handler that you're going to work with if you're going to do decoy work is the newbie, the new guy. This handler has very little or no experience. Everything has to be clarified before the dog is taken out, down to the most basic terms like post up, drag, all those things. You have to break it down step by step to that new handler, or have an experienced club member break it down for you to them. Okay? So some of these terms like post up, be a tree, they can be very confusing to a new handler, but because you're experienced, you might not realize how new some of these concepts are to that new handler. If you're an experienced decoy and you go, okay, I need you to post up, I'm going to give you a nod. You're going to let your dog drag towards me, and then about a foot away from me, you're going to let the dog go. That's a simple set of instructions for an experienced handler. But for a new handler, you just might have just gone completely over their head. So you have to break everything down for them because they're new. They're brand new. Okay, I will even go as far as doing a dry run. Like I will even have that. I'll hand them a leash and I'll go, okay, I'm the dog. Here's how you're going to hold the leash. Or watch, you're the dog. Watch how I'm holding the leash. When I say this is what I want you to do. So if I have to do a dry run, I will do a dry run. Okay, there's more room for error with a new handler because you also have to focus on the handler, not just the dog. You have to focus on the dog. You have to focus on the handler. Sometimes you have to tell the handler what to do because they get stuck. They forget. So that's the one type of handler. A good way to make things easier for you and the handler is to have an experienced member nearby so that the experienced member can also help them out if they need to. Okay, provided that this works out. So if their dog is too focused on the helper, then obviously this is not going to work out. The dog should be focused on the decoy, not the member helping that handler out. So also, if you have a newbie, tell that newbie, dude, pay attention to what the other handlers are doing. I want you to watch how they're handling their dogs. I want you to watch this evolution because this is probably what I'm going to be doing with your dog. I want you to watch what this guy is doing, and I want you to do the same exact thing. So please pay attention to what's happening there. I'll tell them to do that as well. Okay, remember, safety is a priority here. A different type of handler that you're going to be working with is the experienced handler. The experienced handler is a great team member, provided that they are willing to work with you, the decoy. If you're fairly new to decoy work, the experienced handler will tell you how they want their dog worked and what works best for their dog. So the experienced handler, if you're new, they will kind of guide you to it. If you're new, pay attention to them. If you have a more experienced decoy helping you, listen to the decoy. They should be both on the same page. So the handler and the decoy should not be telling you different things if you're new. If you're a more experienced decoy and are working with an experienced handler, remember they know their dog, take their training plan as a roadmap, okay, and help them out and make adjustments as needed. So sometimes I'll have a handler that will bring their dog that they're visiting, and they've been working, they're very committed people. They've been working with their dog somewhere else. And I will tell them, tell me what you want me to do, how you want me to work your dog. So that's what I'll do, right? So with a very experienced handler, a good handler, they clearly know what they're doing. Their dog is a very good reflection of that. I don't have a problem at all telling them, tell me what you want me to do. I will do exactly what you want. And I will work your dog exactly how you want me to work your dog. Now, I will make adjustments, of course. Like if at a moment's notice, I notice that the dog could use something else, I will do it for the sake of the dog, and I will explain it to the handler. And if it goes well, which it does, if I notice that I need to change the plan a little bit, I will change it, make the dog better, and then the handler goes, oh, okay, thank you. I see why you did that, and it worked out much better. So that is one of the things that sometimes you have to pay attention to. Okay, so you are going to be working with experienced handlers. Okay. The other type of handler is another type of handler that you're going to work with, and every decoy, every experienced decoy has at least worked with a small handful of these. The other type of handler is the overconfident handler. Okay. Decoys don't normally like to work with this type of handler. This is a person that greatly overestimates the capacity of their dog and their handling abilities. They tend to want to try things that don't really help their cause, that don't really help their dog. They want their dog to do what the previous dog just did, or they want to move past the level of progression that their dog is in. So the overconfident handler, if like a a previous team did something, or two teams prior to him did something, the overconfident handler goes, I want to do that too, even though their dog is not ready for that. That's the type of shit that they'll do. They don't realize that those sessions that were done by those previous dogs are different because those are different handlers and those are different dogs. But they go, I want to do that too. God, these people are idiots. And you're like, what are you doing? That's not what your dog needs. You don't even know this scenario. Your dog has never even seen this scenario. They are doing it because it makes sense to them. It makes sense to their dogs, not your dog. Like, I just want to see how he does. No. Okay, most certainly not. So this is the overconfident handler. They overestimate their abilities too. Okay, like another characteristic of the overconfident handler is, like, if you're working on targeting, they want to do long bites. Like, dude, we're just now starting to introduce your dog to targets. Oh, I want to do a long bite and cans and this and that. No, your dog is not ready for those things. You have to, like, why do you want to test your dog so bad? It's a young dog. Okay, go do that shit somewhere else. Go to whoever you saw that video on Facebook. Go to that person. They will oblige. But like, they just want to jump the gun constantly. Like, if their dog is on a sleeve, they want to do jacket already. They already want to do the suit. Like, they're like, oh, he can do the bite suit. Has he ever been on a bite suit? No. What has he done? He just did the puppy sleeve. All right, if you just were working on the puppy sleeve, your dog is certainly not ready for the bite suit just yet. Give it a little bit of time. Okay, this is the type of dog, this is the type of handler whose dog is nowhere near trial ready, but they want a trial. God, I've seen these people and I've worked with them. They're like, oh, I signed up for the trial, and you're like, dude, your dog is not ready. Oh, no, we signed up for the trial. Your dog's gonna get spooked. Your dog's gonna have a bad experience, or your dog will learn that it can disregard you because now you have no way to follow through. You're not ready. You're not consistent. Your dog is not ready. Your dog is still young and immature. You cannot just rush to it. Again, this is the type of crap that the overconfident handler sometimes wants to do. Okay, and also, like, they want to rush things at the expense of their dog, or even the expense of your own safety. You have to be very careful of this handler. They will put you in harm's way because they want to see what happens. Right? They will look like a fool in the trial field and be quick to point the finger in your direction because you are unable to help them out with their unrealistic timelines. I've had a handler in my club at one point. I just kicked her out. She was an idiot. She brought her dog in and she wanted to speed everything up. Talk about overconfident handler, completely delusional about her abilities and about her dog's abilities. So I wanted to help her dog out, but she just kept rushing. She's like, okay, when can we do targeting? Hold on, let's first work on the grip. Then let's teach your dog the concept of what an out is. Let's teach your dog some control. Oh, I don't want to do that. Okay, all right, we can do this. And just every week, she kept wanting to take several steps forward. We were like, your dog has only done this once. Oh, he's ready for the next thing. He's not ready for the next thing. Oh, I signed up for this trial. Your dog is not ready for trial. Oh, he'll be fine. Okay, do your thing. Then what happened? Her dog did not do well. And she got humiliated. Humiliated. Her dog was so unprepared. Of course, I look like an idiot too, because then she goes, oh, I'm in Will's club. So completely looked like an idiot. Completely just got humiliated. She never came back to the sport. Like, she was done. And then first she was like, oh, I want to go. I'm like, no, you're not coming back. He's like, I want to come back and I want to do the training. Nope, we're not doing that. You're going to go somewhere else. You're not going to come back to my club. But that was pretty much it. That was like the end of her trialing her dog. She just looked like an idiot. She cried. She got all upset because she asked for it. This is how delusional these people can be. You have to be very careful with these people. And occasionally I run into these people and I got to set the boundaries straight. Had another member, same thing, not to the level of ridiculousness as this previous example, but I've had this other member too. Similar thing happened. Now she does follow instructions. She is she's a good member, but she rushed to the trial, and I told her your dog is not ready. She'd rushed to it, and she's like, "Oh no, I want a trial." I'm like, okay. She went, got humiliated, just completely humiliated, got all upset, cried, and I was this close from just telling her, "Don't come back." Only reason I didn't say that is because she's actually a good member. So I told her, one last chance. You're not going to do that again. Okay? So you have to be careful with these people because, one, they will compromise the safety of their dog and your safety. And they will do it to rush because, I don't know, they have maybe some void or they want some sense of validation. Who knows? Whatever problems they have. But these people can be trouble because, again, you're dealing with dogs here that are biting. So the margin for error with a delusional and overconfident handler like this could be pretty big. Okay, so there are good dogs out there that you could really. This is the thing. I mean, I love good dogs. They're freaking awesome dogs out there. But sometimes these really good dogs reward shitty behavior like this too. I mean, I've known handlers that are idiots, complete idiots, do put their dogs in training scenarios that are way too much for their dog. But because they're good, awesome dogs, their dogs recover. So as awesome as these dogs are, they unfortunately do end up rewarding this super shitty behavior. But life goes on. You have to move on. Another word on handlers. Here's the thing on handlers, right? So I just described different types of handlers. I went over the newbie, the experienced handler, and the overconfident handler. Especially the last category. I just spent like the last 5-10 minutes just basically just shitting on this type of handler. But here's the thing, okay? In general, you have to remember this. They're people. They're people just like you and I. They have feelings. And I know things can get heated in the training field. And it can be frustrating to watch them make the same mistake over and over again and to see their dogs confused. But you need to find it in you to treat these people with dignity, treat everybody with dignity and respect, and realize that they're also on their own journey to getting better as handlers. Just like you are in your journey to being a good helper, they are also in their journey to being a good handler. I'm not suggesting that you love them and accept them and that you hold their hand. You can still be very direct and to the point without being condescending. Like these people that I had these serious talks with, I never talked down on them. I never told them, you idiot, you piece of shit, and all of that. I never treated them like that. I just was very matter of fact, and I was like, hey, dude, don't come back. You're done. Or if you are going, if you still want me to help you, we have to do it this way. So remember, these are people. Different kinds of dogs and different styles of development. If your goal is to be a good trial decoy, this might not be the most interesting section for you. As a trial decoy, your primary job will be to safely test the dog, regardless of what kind of dog it is. You will have to show the same intensity from one dog to the next with no variations. If you're a training decoy, your responsibility extends beyond wearing a sleeve or a suit. You have to learn to develop each individual that steps into that field. you will learn that some dogs develop different than others. Some are slower learners. Some are more sensitive. Some are more prey-oriented. And some are more on the defensive side. Some have handlers who still are trying to figure out how things work. And some are a combination of all of the above. Each dog that steps into the training field is an individual. I have found that different handlers and trainers have their preferences. If you have a preference, it's in your team's best interest and your growth as a training decoy to learn to work with different personalities and bring out the best in each dog. I've seen plenty of decoys that they just like to work with one type of dog. And same thing with handlers. Some training decoys, some trainers like to work with one type of dog. And they don't really step out of that. So when they have a dog that doesn't fit their normal criteria, they don't want to work with that dog. They'll wash the dog out, or they're just not as good at developing those dogs. But you want to be able to develop and work with different kinds of dogs. It just makes you a better helper, a better decoy. You want to be proficient at working with all kinds of dogs. Training and developing puppies from the decoy's perspective is a unique task also. You definitely don't want to train all dogs, puppies, and young dogs like adult dogs. This is going back to certain types of dogs that some people are not comfortable working with. Training with puppies is very different. You can't train a puppy like an adult. If you do, you're just not going to get very far. That puppy's not going to get very far. So you want to make sure that every experience with any dog, especially with a puppy, that they have to be fun. The dog, the puppy, they have to consistently win. You want to avoid mistakes with young puppies because they're in that critical development stage. Training young green dogs is a bit different. There may already be some training in their background, or you may just be working with a very driven but completely green dog. Many trainers, handlers, and decoys prefer working with a young adult because there's less guesswork in that dog than working with a puppy. With a puppy, there's still a bunch of variables. I mean, the puppy could have a lot of promise, could show a lot of promise, but until that puppy gets a little bit older, you don't really know what you're working with. This is the case with puppies in general. And this isn't just my opinion. I've talked to other trainers from this book too that have told me the same thing. It's just one of those things that you don't know how they're going to turn out. Sometimes they show a lot of promise and they don't work out, or sometimes they don't show a lot of promise, but when they mature, they turn out to be awesome dogs. Then you have adult dogs that are cross-training from a different discipline into another discipline. So they'll cross-train from, for instance, French ring to PSA, or from IPO to PSA, or from PSA to French ring. Different combinations of all of those things. This is where being familiar with more than one sport is helpful if you're a training decoy. Because if I'm a training decoy and I'm working out with a dog that has had French ring in its background, and now this dog wants to trial for PSA, I have an idea of how they are training the French ring dogs. I have an idea of what the introduction to bite work was like. I have an idea of what the development was like. The techniques are certainly going to be different for that dog. Knowing that helps me so that I can adjust the training session so that it's beneficial to that individual. So it is part of the whole growth process as a training decoy. You want to be familiar. You don't have to be an expert in all the disciplines, but if you're at least familiar, it certainly helps. At some point, you will also work with dogs that haven't had the best training background. I've done this, and other people have done this too. In an ideal world, every dog gets the best training no matter where they go, but it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes you're going to get dogs This happens. You get dogs that have been to other clubs. The other clubs maybe did the best they could with what they had. They didn't really know a whole lot, or maybe they were not used to working with that type of dog. So they did the best they could with what they had. The dog did not progress in their system. And now the dog has developed some bad habits, and now you have to undo those bad habits. So this is part of being a training helper. That's just how it is. You will occasionally run into unsafe dogs too. This also happens. It is very vital to recognize when a dog is not safe. This comes with experience. There are times where I'm working a dog and it's a dog that I'm not very familiar with. The dog is clearly not having fun. He looks very defensive right from the beginning. He looks uncomfortable. I know I can pick up on that, and I know I have to adjust my training session. I have to adjust my movements, and I might even have to start with something different than what the handler had intended for that first session. So these are things that you have to be very aware of. Dogs can be unsafe. That's just how it is. Just the nature of the beast. Not every dog is just friendly and they want to have fun and bite the rag or the sleeve or the suit. Some dogs are a little bit more serious about this, especially if they don't truly know you that well. So you have to work them slower. Okay, these are the dogs that have some quirks or get more serious during bite work. These could be your hand biters, your opportunistic biters, your hand biters, your leg biters, your dirty biters, face biters. Now, if you have a good handler, the handler should tell you their dog's quirks. Unfortunately, there are plenty of times where these handlers are too embarrassed to disclose this information. I've seen it. Their dogs are not safe, but they don't really want to tell you that because that's a little bit of a hit to their ego. So you have to, on top of asking the handler, especially if you don't know that dog, you have to pay attention to that dog too. If you're working with a new team or a team that is visiting you, get as much info about the dog as possible, and don't be surprised if you encounter something the handler forgot to mention. When it comes to working with teams you don't know, the rule of thumb is never trust a handler. How to get better and who to learn from. If decoying is something you really enjoy, it will become more enjoyable when you actually know what you're doing. To get better as a decoy, you have to become a better dog trainer. Period. That's just how it is. Especially if you're a training decoy. Your role as a training decoy is so enormous. It's just such a huge responsibility to be a training decoy. Your timing has to be on point. You have to have a good read on the dog, and you have to be able to change your approach at a moment's notice. Watching dogs training dogs, watching dogs do bite work, and watching good decoys work dogs are some of the best things you can do to get better. Just sitting on the sidelines and waiting for the helper to ask you to put on a suit or take a bite, that's just not going to make you better. Which is, if you don't have any interest in getting better, that's perfectly fine. I'm just telling you how you could get better is by watching. That's how I did it. That's how I got better. That's how other helpers that I've talked to and helpers that have contributed to this project, that's how they got better. Okay, you need to watch, ask questions, be determined to learn something new every time you work a dog. Just going through the motions, just not going to make you better. It might make you better with the mechanics if you just want to catch dogs, but it's not going to make you better at troubleshooting if you don't really pay attention, if you're not really thoughtful about the process. There seems to be a belief that you just need to catch dogs and you'll get better on your own. Although there is some truth to that. If you just work dogs with poor technique, you're just creating bad habits, plain and simple. In your quest to get better, you may need to drive some distance to a couple of different clubs and watch the training regularly. If that's what has to be done, so be it. Do it. Of course, if you want to be a prop and you just want to put on a suit when they need you, then that's fine. This book might not be for you. It's okay to just be a prop if that's all you want to do. If you want to get better, you need to take an active role in the club and take an interest in other people's training, even when it's not your turn. All the decoys in this book are amazing decoys. The information in these pages that follow is very valuable content. These are people you want to follow and get every opportunity to learn from. Good traits to develop. Through my research and personal quest to get better, I have found some common traits all good decoys have. One of them being interest in the discipline. All the successful training helpers and trial helpers I spoke with had a great interest in the activity. They watched and learned persistently. They were hungry for knowledge and even supplemented their knowledge with additional activities to make themselves better. As Barbelone said in his interview regarding good traits for a good helper, quote, "We want to see people coming to every training, watching and watching," end of quote. Bart himself did this for several months at a very young age before he was ever allowed to step in the field. When I spoke to Tom Rose, his words were, quote, "I think the most important thing is someone who is fascinated by the individual dog, the training, and getting that dog to the highest level it can achieve," end of quote. And according to Jerry Bradshaw, quote, "Training decoys need to be super well versed in learning theory and understanding protection foundation, how to develop those dogs, what the progressions for targeting are, and the progressions for any skill. You should be able to outline and explain it," end of quote. As you can see, almost obsessive interest in this activity is one of the best traits you can have as a helper, as a decoy. When I get people who come to my club because they just want to learn to decoy, right? They just want to spend more than half of the meeting sitting on the sidelines bullshitting around, I know that person has no interest in actually decoying. They just want to get off on the occasional bite here and there. They just want to be props. They want to look cool. They have no idea that this requires a lot more study than just going through the motions. The other thing, athletic ability. This is especially important in the trial field. Every dog that is tested in the trial field needs the same level of intensity and power. If you're decoying in a trial and you're getting tired on the fifth dog, this is not ideal. You could even lose your trial certification if you consistently show a lack of stamina in the field. As a training decoy, you also need to have some level of stamina. As a training decoy, you're primarily teaching and troubleshooting techniques that change with every dog. Although fitness is not as strong a demand for training decoys, it's very difficult to teach techniques from a chair when you're exhausted. So fitness, athletic ability, that's got to be there. That's got to have some role in your routine. Tips from the pros. I will let the pros tell you their tips themselves on the rest of the book. But the main things I got from all the interviews were the following. Be humble. Take care of your body. Have an open mind. Keep decoying. If you don't use it, you lose it. Be willing to learn from people, even if they do a different sport. Become a better dog trainer. Learn to read dogs. And remember that we do this for the dog, not for our ego. This is it for the audio version of the book. The rest of the book has all the interviews from Dave Croyer all the way to Michael and Barbelone, all the people that I listed in the beginning. And at the very end, there is the interview with my chiropractors. So I wanted you guys to get the main topic of the book on audio, but it's gonna be very difficult for me to do the role of the interviewer and the interviewee on audio. because there is no way I can capture what Dave Croyer sounds like, or his own voice, or his mannerisms. And same thing for all the other speakers. I don't want to rob them of that. I think once you read the book, you'll really get a much better sense of them as you read it, without my inflections, without my interpretations. So to do them justice, I'm not going to continue with the audio on the interviews. But I do have one last thing. I do have one quote from Josh Kirby at the very end of the book that I put on here. This is not part of the interview. This is from a post on the PSA Facebook group, the Facebook group. He put this post a while ago, and I screenshotted it because it's just such an awesome, awesome post. And I'm going to read it to you. Be a good club member. Help out, come early, stay late, learn from other handlers and dogs, and don't sit on the sidelines and stare at your phone when your dog isn't being worked. Help out at trials, even if you're not competing. Donate your time. Thank your decoys. Have fun. Build each other up. Celebrate your club member success. Feed the decoys beer. Pet your dog. Be a good competitor. Be humble in victory and gracious in defeat. You are participating in a sport with a high failure rate. Remember that. If it was easy, everyone would do it. Listen to the judges. Do not listen to the decoys when you are competing. This is talking about PSA. But seek them out after the trial because they've been intimate with your dog and can help your future training. Don't forget that it's just a sport. Failure makes success much sweeter. Pet your dog. Be a good decoy. Value safe catches over anything else. Be professional in everything you do, on and off the field. Find mentors. Be a mentor. Thank handlers for their trust. Never take a moment on the field for granted. Test dogs, build dogs, and return dogs to their handlers better than you found them. Be humble. The sport needs you, but the sport is bigger than you. Take care of each other because only a select few know what it's like to do what we do. End of quote, Josh Kirby.